All right, we are live. Welcome. This is Orion Rising. I'm your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into this show. Show this out, show this out, show this out. All right, it's Friday night. Law of One. Welcome. There's Brooke. I see Brooke. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How you doing? I love you. Welcome. Please share this out and tag everybody. Get them in here. Right, Rick, welcome. Risen Nation, welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, let me take down this banner, this overlay here. Whoops. There we go. So you guys can see my ugly face, my ugly mug. There I am. Okay. And my camera's a little crooked, isn't it? Well, we're going to leave it where it's at right now because I'm going to be off camera anyways pretty soon. So welcome aboard. Let me get back to the comments so I can see you guys here. Cassie, welcome. Everybody share this out, share this out. Law of One, as you can see on the screen, I backed up because we were on question 20. I think is where we stopped, a little bit past that. So I just backed up to the beginning of this half of session 87. So it's on question 15. We'll just start there and we'll just move forward from there. So it's okay because that way we can redo the questioning. So the line of questioning is more intact for us when we get there. Reese, welcome. Yeah, like I said, share this out, please. Link it to everybody and start tagging people, get them in here, right? So, and my internet is down to one stick right now. So I apologize if I'm buffing for you guys right now. Not sure what's going on with that. But it's getting a little bit better right now, but it's still not full strength. So we might be having an issue there. Now it's back to full strength. Not sure what's going on. I know the last week we had an air show over here. Joanne, welcome. Last week we had an air show over here, and that was causing me to dip a little bit at certain times. Good thing I don't do this on the weekend because they were literally flying over my house from Mather, the military base, international joint military base that's over here by me, because I'm surrounded on three sides by military bases. Well, actually, two international airports, civilian, and two international joint air bases, and then one National Guard base. So I'm like east from me because the mountains are east and north from me. So northeast, it doesn't have any military bases until you get over on the mountain up in the Sierras. But otherwise, everything this way around me, behind me over here, which is south and west and north, is military and civilian in the valley here. Okay. And then really, literally less than 5 miles in a 5 mile radius, right? I think the SAC International is about 20 minutes away, for almost 30 minutes away from here. And that's just because you got to drive through Sacramento to go out to the airport. Okay. Peter, welcome. Welcome. Okay. And Denise, welcome. So, all right. Yeah. Share this out. Let's get everybody in here. We'll go ahead and do a sound check and get started here with the Law of One. We're on session 87, question number 15, and we'll just run from there. All right. So welcome everybody. Welcome. Let me go over here and put this up into full screen. Let me put this up into full screen there. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and do a sound check. And we'll make sure that you guys can hear Raw talking okay. Deborah, welcome. Deborah Anderson, welcome. So we'll make sure you guys can hear Raw talking all right. And we'll just continue from there. So let me go ahead and press play over here. And you guys let me know if you can hear it in the chat. Okay. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to, but just in case. Say something, because if you can't hear it, I'd like to know that so that I won't be playing dead air. We're thinking you guys can hear what's going on. All right, here we go.
Question 87.15. Questioner, then assuming that a single negatively oriented entity is responsible for the recruiting of a harvested third density entity and adds its polarity to his negative polarity and power, what type of ability or what type of benefit is this and how is it used by the entity? Answer, I am Ra. The so-called pecking order is immediately challenged and the entity with increased power exercises that power to control more other selves and to advance within the social memory complex structure. Question 87.16. Questioner, how is this power measured? How is it obvious that this entity has gained this additional power? Answer, I am Ra. In some cases there is a kind of battle. This is a battle of wills and the weapons consist of the light that can be formed by each contender. In most cases where the shift of power has been obvious, it simply is acknowledged and those seeing benefit from associating with this newly more powerful entity aid it in rising within the structure. Question 87.17. Questioner, thank you. we noticed a possibility of confusion between the term mind, body, spirit, and mind, body, spirit complex in the last session. Were there a couple of misuses of those terms in shifting one for the other? Answer: I am Ra. There was an error in transmission. The use of the term mind, body, spirit should refer to those entities dwelling in third density prior to the veiling process. The term mind, body, spirit complex referring to those entities dwelling in third density after the veiling process. We also discover a failure on our part to supply the term complex.
That flickering will settle down in a minute. I noticed it with this program that Matthew Moose used. Every now and then it would do this, and it would either be a little bit blurry or it would flicker a little bit, sometimes a little dim too, and then it would right itself as the program goes on. So this has always done this since all the way back in 2017 when I was using these videos then. So it'll work itself out in a minute. I apologize for that. It's not my technology, but I actually like this version best, and I have since I started doing the Law of One. Okay, let's continue here.
When speaking of body after the veiling, please correct these errors. Also, we ask that you keep a vigilant watch over these transmissions for any errors and question without fail, as it is our intention to provide as undistorted a series of sound vibration complexes as is possible. This entity, though far better cleared of distortions towards the pain flares when prepared by those mental vibration complexes you call prayer, is still liable to fluctuation due to its pre-incarnative body complex distortions and the energizing of them by those of negative polarity. Question 87.18. Questioner: thank you. We will make the corrections asterisk. In the last session you made the statement that before the veiling, sexual energy transfer was always possible. I would like to know what you meant by it was always possible and why it was not always possible after the veiling, just to clear up that point. Asterisk: the text was corrected before publishing and now reads as it should. Answer: I am Ra. We believe that we grasp your query and will use the analogy in your culture of the battery which lights the flashlight bulb. Two working batteries placed in series always offer the potential of the bulb's illumination. After the veiling, to continue this gross analogy, the two batteries being placed not in series would then offer no possible illumination of the bulb. Many mind, body, spirit complexes after the veiling have, through blockages, done the equivalent of reversing the battery. Question 87.19. Questioner: what was the primary source of the blockages that caused the battery reversal? Answer: I am Ra. Please query more specifically as to the mind, body, spirits or mind, body, spirit complexes about which you request information. Question 87.20. Questioner: before the veil there was knowledge of the bulb lighting technique, shall we say. After the veil some experiments created a bulb lighting, some resulted in no bulb lighting. Other than the fact that information was not available on methods of lighting the bulb, was there some root cause of the experiments that resulted in no bulb lighting? Answer: I am Ra. This is correct. Question 87.21. Questioner: what was this root cause? Answer: I am Ra. The root cause of blockage is the lack of the ability to see the other self as the creator, or to phrase this differently, the lack of love. Question 87.22.
See, so the veiling, when it happened, when we went from being unveiled, because originally everybody was unveiled, and then going to be veiled, and then having chaos involved, there were some problems that arose from that the creator obviously knew about, that people had to contend with. So when you became veiled, you didn't know that you were the creator, and most people don't to this day. On Earth, it's mostly, most of the people, let me put myself up in full screen so you can see me. Most of the people on the planet don't have any idea that they're more than just a flesh pain body. So it takes a lot for people, 7 to 10 lifetimes, because there are 7 chakras, to balance and go through all of those and illuminate that and illuminate yourself enough to become unveiled. To then start realizing that's why early on, Ra said, and you see this in most religions, where they're trying to tell you except for they were edited out from most, especially Christianity and the Hebrew religion and almost all the other ones. It was edited out, but you find them in like the Dead Sea Scrolls and different scrolls when they find them from more ancient times, and when they dig them up and find them so they weren't edited yet, about them trying to tell you about the illumination and the like, and they immediately start talking about how you are in fact an immortal soul, and then beyond that you're actually part of the creator and that you're part of the creation of this place. I was just talking about this very thing, I think it was last night, talking about this very thing that if you look in history, the scientists have now figured out, archaeologists have figured out that we know in history that people, let me start back with that. We know in history that people in Central and South America, millions of people just disappeared off the face of the earth at a specific time. And then people forgot about them and didn't know they were there. But then the people started finding their dwellings that they had made, their cities and their ziggurats, their pyramids down there. And when the West came and found them, and they asked the locals down in Central and South America, Mexico, Central South America, who built those, they said it was these ancient people that are gone now. And everybody just assumed that they had a famine or something and they moved away. And the more they looked and the more they looked and the more they looked, the more they found an information that they've kept quiet from the rest of the world, until just recently some people leaked that information out. Raw talked about that in 1982, actually. Raw talked about that in 1982, saying that there was a group of people that lived in Central and South America who were teaching the law of one to their people, and that they all ascended together. Okay, so you can say, and many have, that Carla made that up, right? And that was just not really a thing, not what happened. And some people just believe aliens came down and swooped up an entire society off the face of the earth, and nobody knew about it. It's kind of akin, and I said this last time when we were talking about this last week, it's kind of akin to in Pirates of the Caribbean when Captain Jack Sparrow was sitting in the prison, and the ship showed up, the Black Pearl showed up and started firing on the town. And one of the guys looked out the window and said, "It's the Black Pearl. They've been raiding and pillaging all up and down the Spanish Main, and they haven't left anybody alive to tell the tales." And then Captain Jack looked at him and said, "Then I wonder where all the stories come from." Somebody had to have been left alive to tell the stories. Otherwise, no one would even know it. Ships would just go missing, and no one would have ever known it. He didn't say that part, but he said, "I wonder where all the stories come from then." So same thing goes for the people in South America. If the aliens took everybody, then how is it that somebody knows that aliens took everybody, but the people down there never say they were taken up in a spaceship? Okay, none of the people down there have ever said that. It's only been a Western world people believing in UFOs and wanting that to be a thing that have said maybe aliens took them. So the scientists looked into where did they go, because if there was something that happened, calamity, war, fire, flood, famine, volcanoes, there would be bodies, there would be burials, and there would be a migration pattern of humans, meaning that there would be an influx of people in the surrounding areas. There was none of that. The literally almost, I think it was like 5 million people, 5 million human beings in a time when that was extraordinary. That would be akin to 386 million Americans disappearing off the face of the earth, just gone. Everything intact, just sitting there. Food on the tables. The fires are burning until they burned out. You know what I mean? Stuff is cooked on the ovens and the stuff being cooked on the stove. Cars sitting at stoplights, just gone off the face of the earth. And then people show up going, "Hey, we haven't heard from any Americans for a while." And they send a drone or an aircraft to America because they can't get in contact with them. And they show up, and all of a sudden there's just nobody. One big giant ghost town. The entire country of America. It would be akin to that many people today in the modern age disappearing all at once. And that's what happened. So there was no dead people. There was no sign of calamity. All of that. Why is it important? Because they were teaching the law of one. They were teaching that this place is an illusion, that you are the creator, that they were discouraging people from being in service to self, encouraging people to being in service to others, right? That was, yeah, Brooke said, yeah, we were just talking about that. Okay, I thought we were just talking about that last night. I couldn't remember for certain, but I'm almost positive that it was. So Brooke and I were just talking about this very thing last night. Thank you, baby. I love you. So literally, they just disappeared, and there is no influx. There is no migratory pattern. So they became unveiled together. Why is that important? Well, here we're talking about the sexual right energy and the lack of knowledge of knowing about it, and that only when you start learning about it do you gain that knowledge to then be able to heighten things that are going on, and that also aids with the ascension. When you do that, when a society starts doing that, Junior Captain Ramos, welcome. Shelly, welcome. Penny, I didn't say how do you either, did I? Penny, welcome. So here Ra's talking about that energy, and Dawn's asking about why is it that there was some of this energy, sexual right energy, that was diminished, and it was because of the veiling. So there was a time before when there was no veiling, and then the creator decided, I'm lazy. We need to change something because everybody knows that they're me. And because of that, everybody's taking their sweet ass time to ascend. So we need to change that. And then the veiling process was introduced to the multiverses. Okay. And in doing so, it diminished a lot of things. One of them being the knowledge of that sexual right energy that is exponentially more intense in a closer bonding between mates than is currently that you're capable of if you're veiled. Even though there's a lot of energy that is transferred from male to female at that time, and energy that's built up between the two during that time, especially if you know what you're doing and you're doing it on a time to build that energy up. If you're tracking, I'm not going to get involved in all of the religious aspects of that. But I used to teach it. So once you get into that ramifications of the physical body and the rituals that are involved in that energy can be really intense. And you can also create a super bond between a man and a woman at that time doing that. Literally your souls almost merge like the Vulcan Ponfar that they do, or the mind meld that they do, especially the Ponfar, because that was in the Star Trek pantheon. If you've ever watched the television series, especially the old one from the 60s, I used to watch the reruns in the 70s going into the 80s when it became popular again and they made the movies. Ponfar was the sexual right energy of adolescence, when a male and a female were bonded for life and promised to be married. They would merge their souls and connect their souls together psychically, and then so it was like as soon as they were capable of doing it. So it was kind of like their bar mitzvah, like the Hebrews do a bar mitzvah, where the male and female were becoming a man and woman, but they weren't old enough to be wed yet and start a family, but they were then attached to one another. And then when the time came later, they would be driven. They would go crazy and insane because they were driven to find each other wherever they were in the universe. They would find each other and they would get together and mate because of that bonding. So they would do that, and they would bond, and then they would have to find each other no matter what, and they would go crazy and even like, in fact, when Spock went through that, he actually took over the ship and was heading to Vulcan because he had to. And at first he didn't even realize he was doing it because it was a subconscious thing that was happening. That is kind of what happens to humans if you've been bonded that way in a past life, or in to where you both have agreed to that. You can ask Brooke about that, between her and I about that. And I didn't ask her permission to talk about this, but I don't know that she would get upset with me if I did. If so, tell me to stop, and I will. But we've been bonded. We've been together in many, many, many lifetimes. So because of that, we, as soon as we were able to find each other, which we were trying to do in this life, as soon as we were able to, thank you, Brooks kind of was killing time to make sure she was okay with this, because I didn't ask her permission to. I didn't realize I was going to go down this road right away when I rewound. Thank you, baby. So because we were already bonded before we got here. And then in every lifetime that we've had on this earth, we were driven to try and find each other, almost desperate. And then when we did find each other, we were just talking about this last night as well, where it's not like we're, even though we're apart right now in distance, because she's in Australia and I'm here in America right now, we don't feel like we're separated. We feel like we're just, like, if you go to work or something and you're down the street and you call up and you talk to your wife on the phone, or you have a video conversation with one another, we also don't feel like it's a brand new thing when you find each other in the life that you're currently in the physical body. There's some getting used to one another because you're in a new body, but there's a deeper connection that can't really be explained unless you meet somebody. And I hate to use the word twin flame or whatever they use here. You guys use some descriptions that sometimes mean the opposite. You don't realize that's what that means. And other times it doesn't really project that. We were just talking about that. We say it all the time. In this language that we use, we're both currently using English, but on the languages of Earth, the amount of love that you can feel for one another is inexpressible down here because the concept doesn't exist because of the veiling. So there aren't any words in the languages of this earth that you can describe the amount of love that you can feel for somebody on a soul level, not just a physical plane level, but on a spirit level. There is a love that is deeper and more intense that you can't feel that. And I'm telling you all of that, not because I'm like bragging or something. I'm telling you all of that because the sexual right energy is the same, and the bonding that happens when you're doing that, if you're doing it on purpose and you're making love and you do that, is intensely different than you can imagine. If you're just having sex with somebody, it's a physical thing and both parties aren't as vested. And then if you're in love, both parties are vested into that, and so it's better. But if your souls actually connect during that time period, and you're aware enough and awake enough to actually let your souls touch and merge at that point, it's way, way, way more intense that it happens at that time period. So it's a crazy. Rick said, "What's sex?" Right? I've heard of it. Yeah. I've heard of it, right? That's funny. What is that? What are you talking about? That's funny, Rick. So literally you have to realize that, but it was diminished with the veiling. So people lost the ability to merge the soul and have the soul touch with one another and activate that. And that's what Raw's talking about right here. So let me go ahead and get Raw, but I want to get some context because listening to it last week, I don't think Raw gets into his full depth of that. That's why I wanted to stop right here and do that a little bit right there, right? Yeah, Penny said, "Oh my God, the love that we feel on a soul level is beyond anything that you can explain." Yeah, you can't. It's just no words for it, right? Let me put up with what Penny was saying there. You can't really explain the depth in human terms if you actually remember being in the spirit realm outside of a physical body and being in that place for already, because most people that are down here, I can't say that now because 86% of the population of the earth is currently not from here. So most 98% to down to maybe 96% of a normal population on a third dimensional planet doesn't know that level because they're going through the progression still, and they don't have any memory of being outside of this place yet, because they're just now moved into I think therefore I am, so just for the very first time self-aware, and they're going through that process. So it's rare that when a person is awake, they also find their mate that is awake with them that is not just from here as well, with a soul contract here as well. So it's rare that you have people that have come as wanderers from a higher plane of existence that have come back down to this level, and then they try to explain to you exactly what it means to be in an infinite universe outside of time, and love somebody infinitely in a way that you can't even fathom down here. So to know that how much love there is in the universe is only achievable once you start moving away from here. You just get a glimpse of it here. You learn what love is down here, but you don't really truly know that until then. And then the higher up you go, the more you realize that it's even more and more and more intense in a way that can't be expressed down here, and it's just crazy. Okay, so getting back on point, and we'll start with Raw again. So we have the sexual right energy that has been diminished through the veiling process, and Dawn is asking questions about that, and Ra is about to give a little bit of an explanation. So let's go ahead and restart this, and I'll move this back into full screen over here.
Questioner: in our particular illusion, the sexual potential for the male seems to peak somewhere prior to the age 20, and the female's peak is some 10 years later. What is the cause of this difference in peaking sexual energy? Answer: I am Ra. We must make clear distinction between the yellow ray, third density, chemical bodily complex, and the body complex, which is a portion of the mind, body, spirit complex. The male, as you call this polarity, has an extremely active yellow ray desire at the space-time in its incarnation, when its sperm is the most viable and full of the life-giving spermato. Thusly the red ray seeks to reproduce most thickly at the time when this body is most able to fulfill the red ray requirements. The yellow ray, chemical body complex of the female, as you call this polarity, must needs have a continued and increasing desire for the sexual intercourse, for it could only conceive once in one 15 to 18-month period, given that it carries the conceived body complex, bears it, and suckles it. This is training to the physical body of yellow ray. To compensate for this, the desire increases so that the yellow ray body is predisposed to continue in sexual congress, thus fulfilling its red ray requirement to reproduce as thickly as possible. The more, shall we say, integral sexuality or polarity of the body complex, which is a portion of the mind, body, spirit complex, does not concern itself with these yellow ray manifestations, but rather follows the ways of the seeking of energy transfer and the furthering of aid and service to others or to the self.
Right. So you guys saw that I put it up on the screen, what Brooke said. But those of you listening on the MP3 broadcast, you don't get to see that or hear that. So Brooke said, even the sexual energy from a distance is beyond any other relationship that have been in, any other relationships have been in beyond. So yeah, it is literally even that for souls that are attached to one another. And it is so even at a distance, the sexual energy is still transferred back and forth between partners, and it's far more intense than anything else that you'll experience. If you're doing that, like, sexting or doing something like that, when you're talking to somebody on a phone or a video or something like that, as a normal human, that's going to be a turn on in and of itself. And I'm sorry, Brooke, I didn't ask you, since you posted that. I just went ahead and started talking about that. So if you're doing that at a distance, normally as a human, that's going to be a turn on anyways. But you don't realize the how powerful that is when you have a soul attachment to somebody. That becomes exponentially, even then, that becomes almost as good. I would say probably at least as good as actual sex physically does for humans on this planet. Yeah, that's the only way that I can explain that, right? I'm getting into some details, baby. So I thought I would make sure you're okay with it. She says, "You're fine. I love you." So so the literally, doing that, even thinking about one another and doing that, back and forth. Let me turn the camera back on over here for those of you listening on the MP3 broadcast. You can't see that anyway, but so sex, normal physical sex, the feeling that you have and the attachment that you have and the euphoric effect and the the hormones that are released in your body during that time is the same for people who have a soul attachment at a distance, and then when they're physically together and they're not just doing it as a mechanical thing, and both people are actually vested and both people are in, that's even more intense because it's a closer bonding, because you don't just feel the body and what's going on, you actually feel the soul as well, so it's more intense. So just messing around on the internet or on a phone or something like that is at least as good as having actual sex with somebody physically, to the normal person of what they go through here. Whether you believe me or not doesn't matter to me. If you've ever experienced it or you ever do in your life, you'll understand it. But until then, you can't achieve that until you find a partner that is just as vested in you as you are them. And then you're both ascending either in service to self or in service to others at the same time, and becoming awake at that moment, and then doing those things. That's when you realize how intense that. But if you don't, you'll never experience that. That's why you have, like, I remember Dr. Ruth, whatever her last name was. She was the sex doctor that was famous over here in the United States for talking about sex forever. But some of the things that she was saying to people were thought were outlandish until they did them or tried them and did that stuff. And then they were like, oh my God, they didn't realize how intimate sex could actually be when you're not just having sex with somebody, that you're actually making love with them instead. And you guys probably didn't expect to come in here and get a lesson on that today, but that is what Ra's talking about. So let's go ahead and continue. But yeah, to experience that, you would actually have to put in the work, though, and both parties in the relationship have to both be willing to be working at that relationship, and then be in that place in a spiritual realm. And then once you are bonded to somebody, or you find that person that is bonded to you on a spiritual level, you'll find that it is completely different. You can't even explain how much you love a person that you're attached to in that way. To people, you can say it, but people go, yeah, okay, yeah, you love each other, I get it, oh, it's just puppy love, eventually it's going to wear off, and you're just like, no, this is transcendental. This goes back thousands of years, not just this lifetime. But hey, if you guys want to say that, you can root all you want. Okay, let's continue. Let me go back over here, put this up in full screen, and we'll continue with Ra talking about that, and Dawn asking those questions about that. But they don't get into as much detail as I just did, guaranteed. As I remember when I went through this the first time, it was somewhat, but not as deeply talked about as I just did. All right, let's continue.
Question 87.23. Questioner: in addition, why is the ratio of male to female orgasms so heavily loaded on the side of the male? Answer: I am Ra. We refer now to the yellow ray, physical body, or, if you will, body complex. At this level the distinction is unimportant. The male orgasm, which motivates the sperm forward to meet its ovum, is essential for the completion of the retrograde desire to propagate the species. The female orgasm is unnecessary. Again, as mind, body, spirit complexes begin to use the sexual energy transfer to learn, to serve, and to glorify the one infinite creator, the function of the female orgasm becomes more clear.
Yeah, and see, they're not talking about it right there, but even science knows now, when you get to doing that, when both parties are vested, when two people actually love each other and they're actually having intercourse, they're having sex, then literally the odds of the female becoming pregnant go up exponentially, different than during rape or during just regular intercourse, or for just the sake of having sex, even though there's still chances there because the male is actually ejaculating sperm inside the female. But if the female also orgasms at the same time, or has, during the sexual encounter, and they're actually thinking about getting pregnant, then you actually have a far greater chance, by like 80%, of actually inseminating an egg and becoming pregnant, because you're both utilizing your your skills of manifestation at that point. So you love each other. You're both vested in that. You're both excited about that. And then you're thinking about and planning to try and get pregnant. So as long as there's not something physically wrong with the male or the female or both that would stifle that, then the chances are exponentially greater by like 80% greater that the female will actually get pregnant. Their science has proven that. It has nothing to do with me telling you that story. It has to do with science actually has proven that. You can look that up, right? And right, yeah, and Peter said, and in some languages, Peter, the word six or the word sex actually means six, right? So it's actually spelled that way in three languages that I'm aware of in Europe. It's not spelled S-I-X, it's actually spelled S-E-X and pronounced the same. So six is sex in some languages. So yeah, so that's the 3, 6, and 9. And that is actually a good point, Peter, because everybody thinks that the heart chakra is the 4th chakra. It's actually the 6th chakra. And that's what some of the problems that people have in understanding what's going on with the everything, including love and all of that, because the chakras are out of order. It's part of the corruption that's been done here to get you guys to not understand what's going on. And the point of reference where it's very apparent is if you go back to Thoth the Atlantean in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which I actually talked about in my book, and I'm actually quoting in the book that I'm currently writing about the theology of the study of religion. So it's the study of the spiritual practice. In the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, Thoth says in there that the gods that rule the energy centers and archetypes of the human condition are 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9. Those are the chakras. So the heart chakra is not the number 4 chakra. It's actually the number 6 chakra. Okay. So love is the green ray chakra. Okay. So it's synonymous with sex if it's love, if that is overlapping. If it's not the orange ray, and this is why Ra was saying here we're referring to the orange ray. So the reason for that isn't as a parent, isn't as something that we need to discuss. You learn that when you move into the green ray. And that's literally where I paused it when he was saying that at the end of that. That's where I paused it. So literally as you're moving up in the chakras, then it has a different meaning. And I don't know if Dawn's going to ask Ra to clarify that at all. But yeah, so literally you have to realize that when you readjust the chakras to their proper positions numerically, the red ray root chakra is not number 1. It's number 3. There are 2 below that, which means there's 2 outside of the human condition. People haven't realized that yet, right? Everyone just sees 7 chakras. They don't realize that there's actually supposed to be 12. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So the word sex is the heart chakra. But if you're in the lower chakras and you're ruled by the lower chakras, then that act that is the sexual right act will be in the orange ray or the yellow ray center of the beingness down here. So it'll be a little bit more physical, which is the description of lower energy and in the sexual right energy, and then higher energy in the sexual right energy being the difference between someone who is physically attracted to somebody and veiled, and somebody who is spiritually attracted to someone and unveiled. So the energy level is completely different because it's moved through the heart now, and it's activating the heart chakra in that act of sex, in that sexual right, or just in sex in general, is being activated through the heart of both parties. And so because of that, it's more intense. And so now you see what I was talking about with what's going on, right? And yeah, and Brooke said, and weirdly, my life path is the number 4, and the number 4 shot and sacral, right? And so, yeah, so think about that, right? So her life path is life path 4, and the sacral chakra is actually the 4th chakra when you count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? If you count it from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, with the adjustment, then the sacral chakra is number 4, not the heart chakra, right? And Brooke is the life path 4, which would place that as a double sacral, right? So think about that, right? So, okay. So let's continue with Raw's explanation and see where they go with the questioning, right? So let me put this back in full screen first, and then we'll go ahead and start, right? So we're on question 24 now.
Question 87.24. Questioner, what was this ratio before the veil? Answer, I am Ra. The ratio of male to female orgasms before the veil was closer to 1:1 by a great deal, as the metaphysical value of the female orgasm was clear and without shadow. Question 87.25. Questioner, is it meaningful to give this ratio in early 4th density, and if so, would you do that? Answer, I am Ra. In many ways it is quite meaningless to speak of orgasm of male and female in higher densities, as the character and nature of orgasm becomes more and more naturally a function of the mind, body, spirit complex as a unit. It may be said that the veil in 4th density is lifted and the choice has been made. In positive polarities, true sharing is almost universal. In negative polarities, true blockage so that the conqueror obtains orgasm, the conquered almost never, is almost universal. In each case you may see the function of the sexual portion of experience as being a most efficient means of polarization. Question 87.26. Questioner, in our illusion we have physical definitions for possible transfers of energy. We label them as the conversion of potential to kinetic or kinetic to heat, and examine this with respect to the increasing entropy.
Wait, before he continues with that question that he's saying, so there you're seeing that when you're unveiled, Raw just stated, when you're unveiled, the energy is exponentially greater between people during that sexual right sensation. So the orgasm is far more intense. Raw just literally said that. All right, let's continue with the line of questioning that Dawn's asking now.
When we speak of sexual energy transfers and other more basic forms of energy, I am always at a loss to properly use, you might say, the terms, since I am not understanding, and possibly can't understand, the basic form of energy that we speak of. However, I intuit that this is the energy of pure vibration, that is, at the basic level of our illusion, that vibration between the space and time portion of the space-time continuum, and yet somehow is transferred into our illusion in a more basic form than that. Could you expand on this area for me, please? Answer, I am Ra. Yes.
Snarky Raw, gotta love that. Very direct. Can you expand on this on this area for me, please? Yes. Would you do that? I love it.
Question 87.27. Questioner, would you do that? Answer, I am Ra. You are correct in assuming that the energy of which we speak in discussing sexual energy transfers is a form of vibratory bridge between space-time and time-space. Although this distinction is not apart from that which follows, the which follows may shed light upon that basic statement. Due to the veiling process, the energy transferred from male to female is different than that transferred from female to male. Due to the polarity difference of the mind, body, spirit complexes of male and female, the male stores physical energy, the female mental and mental emotional energy. When 3rd density sexual energy transfer is completed, the male will have offered the discharge of physical energy. The female is, thereby, refreshed, having far less physical vitality. At the same time, if you will use this term, the female discharges the efflux of its stored mental and mental emotional energy, thereby offering inspiration, healing, and blessing to the male, which by nature is less vital in this area. At this time, may we ask for one more full query? Question 87.28. Questioner, why is the male and the female nature different? Answer, I am Ra. When the veiling process was accomplished, to the male polarity was attracted the matrix of the mind, and to the female, the potentiator of the mind, to the male the potentiator of the body, to the female the matrix of the body. May we ask if there are any brief queries before we close this working?
See, so you have to realize that, okay, so let me reread that, right? You can see it on your screen there. When the veiling process was accomplished, to the male, polarity was attracted to the matrix of the mind, and to the female, right? So the potentiation of the mind to the male, the potentiator of the body, to the female, the matrix of the body, right? So you have to realize that you had the masculine and feminine energies, the Kundalini Kunda buffer energies, in every way. So the female embodied the emotional, the healing, and the nurturing, whereas the man embodied the physical, warlike aggression, archetypes. So the personas, so the as above, so below, as within, so without, as below, so above. So you have now the masculine and feminine energies, and then because of that, the masculine, puts his penis into a woman. That's aggressive. It's an aggressive act, and then the male has to ejaculate sperm into the woman, and then that sperm finds the egg and fertilizes the egg to start the process of creating a child. So that's very masculine, and the female is the receiver, the receptacle of that, and the nurturer and the caregiver. So it's playing out on a physical plane is it the same way it's playing out on the archetype plane, the same way that it's playing out on the spiritual plane, that the energies of the male and female have the complete archetypes. And that's the balance that helps to achieve all of that. And that's why that is done the way it is. And that's what Ross trying to explain when he said, why does the man, give energy to the woman? Because the man is giving the sperm to the woman, and she is accepting that and then creating, using that to create. So the energy has to be transferred to the woman from the man, as the essence of the God is being implanted into the female, and she's accepting that as the goddess and then creating. So it's their energies together that do that. So the man has to expel that. And I know you guys, if you know anything about, if you've learned anything about sex, with humans or any other animals, that because the man, masculine and feminine energies, you already know this, and this isn't sex 101, right? This is in fact the law of one. So, however, that's what Ra's talking about here. So you have to realize that that's why when male and female were created, and then the veiling was created, that all had to be done that way with the archetypes to give us this rounded out matrix that we have of life and death and creation, so that we could then self-sustain ourselves and create life. So when you hear people talking about aliens creating the human race, and it's just like when they say that Jesus was created, never existed, was created by the Romans to control the Jews. There are so many things and aspects about both of those scenarios that they would have never thought about, so they couldn't have created that. So when people were like, yeah, they've just created humans in a petri dish, and it was just aliens playing with the primates' DNA to create a slave race. And so if you believe that, then why would they have added all that other stuff in? There would have been no reason for that. You're creating a slave race. You don't give a crap about that. You don't even care if they have a function or other than to procreate. So you wouldn't make it pleasurable, because you wouldn't care if you're creating a slave race. And if you're trying to trick them into thinking they're not a slave, you might add something to make it pleasurable so that they're driven to actually do that. But now you're saying that you're also designing in the instincts to have to procreate like animals do. And well, if animals do that, humans are ruled the same way. If that's the case, then how come women aren't going into heat every time they're on their period? And how come they're not going into heat and just having to have sex with somebody right now to get pregnant? They're not doing that. Some women feel kind of like that, and some women don't at that time of the month. But the point is of this: if we were ruled just like animals, we wouldn't be any different than animals, because What you don't know, unless you do know, is that animals have a soul just like we do, and they're you before you become a human. So why would that change? So if you're ruled by instinct as an animal and you're not self-aware yet, why does self-awareness allow you to then control that and not have that instinct where you have to have children? Because that would mean that as soon as somebody got pregnant, they wouldn't have those instincts anymore, and then they would give birth. But as soon as they gave birth, they should go right back to going into heat until they got fixed, because that's what animals do. And they go into heat and they're just dying they're driven to try and have children. Okay, so that kind of happens a little bit to humans as well, because women will talk about their biological clock ticking when they know that it's going to stop in their 40s or 50s. And so they're trying to have kids before that, but it's nowhere near as intense. So are people going to say that the self-awareness allows them to ignore that? That would be, that would be crazy to think of, because when they're not self-aware, they have that instinct and they're still doing it, right? So it wouldn't be just the self-awareness. There has to be some other kind of physiological change that's there. So you can't say that humans were created by aliens, because why would they? Here's my point. Why would they not? If the animals, the same aliens supposedly created all the animals, why wouldn't they create that same instinct to make sure that the population of the humans continued by doing that? They're afraid that they're going to breed like rabbits and they're going to be too many of them. Well, they created them so that they could have slave labor. And we humans take longer to gestate than any other people, except for maybe a whale, on the face of the earth. So it's not efficient. It's not efficient. And I would see that, even if I'm not a slave trader, I would see that, because I see it right now. I see it right now that that's not efficient, that somebody would maybe even choose not to have children and not do that. You don't want anybody doing that, because when you create a civilization, the key for creating slave labor and having slave labor is that you're working them to death because you don't care about their well-being whatsoever. Okay, so that would suggest that our slave captors really loved us when they created us to make sure that we were procreating, but that we were also not doing it and had a choice of only having one kid or no kids or 10 kids or 100 kids. And so that would be a lousy way to create slaves, because it takes a very long time for the slave to grow up and be able to be a slave. Even if you have child labor, you're going to kill the children quicker, so they're not going to get old enough to breed. So the human genome is very inefficient if it was created as a slave. It was a terrible job. Whoever created it needs to be tried and put on prison and executed, because they created something that is not really sustainable. You have to have a large population to have slaves, because if you have a small population and you don't treat your slaves right and keep them alive, they're not going to live long enough to have kids, and their kids aren't going to live long enough to have kids. Okay, so if I were creating a slave population, they would breed like rabbits, because then you can work them to death and it doesn't matter. You just need to keep some of them around to have more kids. And then what you do is you just have birthers. You have women who their job is just to have children. Okay, and that's kind of what they do now, because they don't have any choice, right? You guys just don't know about it because you don't want to see it, but there's slave labor on the planet, and that's what they do. They kidnap women and they have them just giving birth to children until they're worn out like you would a chicken, and then they get rid of they kill the person off. You guys don't want to know that, because you don't want to see that hideousness of what's actually going on right in your own society. There's more slaves in the United States than there is anywhere else. It's just you don't know about it. It's not official. Okay. So let's continue, instead of getting too far into politics and having people get mad at me on the internet for talking about that. Joanne said, I don't know why, but Black Widow spiders has just came into my mind, right? Because of what we were talking about a second ago. That's actually pretty funny. All right, let's pull this back up and go into details here. Well, and you have like the praying mantis, right? That was a lousy design too, because after the praying mantis, and then the spiders, we'll get back to that. And why I'm going to the praying mantis. So after the praying mantis, after the male ejaculates into the female eats his head, kills him, murders him, eats him, and he dies. And then the same thing happens with some spider species. When the man impregnates the female kills him, and then lays the eggs in his body for the kids. So think about that. All right, let's continue.
Question 87.29. Questioner, is there anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or to improve the contact? Answer, I am Ra. We shall find the suggested readjustment of the sensor helpful. The alignments are good. You have been conscientious, my friends. We leave you now in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing merrily in the power and in the ineffable peace of the one infinite Creator.
Okay, so this time I made sure to queue it up so that it should go to the next session by itself, so I don't have to go and click on it. Last time I didn't queue it up in the right queue to have it do that. So yeah, see, so this is the Law of One, May 29th, 1982.
I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. We communicate now. Question 88.1. Questioner, could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? Answer, I am Ra. The physical complex energy deficit is considerable at this space-time. There has been also a significant loss of the vital energies. However, these energies are still well within the distortion you may call strength. Question 88.2. Questioner, of all of the things that you have mentioned before for replenishing these energies at this particular space-time, which would be most appropriate for the replenishing of both of these energies? Answer, I am Ra. As you know, there are many factors which contribute to the aiding of the strength distortions and the amelioration of distortions towards weakness in this instrument. We suggest to each that those many things which have been learned be conscientiously applied. We would single out one physical distortion for discussion. The fourth density negative minions which visit your group at this time are energizing a somewhat severe complex of imbalances in the manual appendages of this instrument and, to a lesser extent, those distortions of the thoracic region. We suggest care be taken to refrain from any unnecessary use of these appendages. As this instrument will not appreciate this suggestion, we suggest the appropriate discussion. Question 88.3. Questioner, I assume from this that our fifth density negative companion is still on R&R, is this correct? Answer, I am Ra. Your fifth density companion is not accompanying you at this time. However, it is not resting. Question 88.4.
Right, so if you guys remember, if you were here last week or if you read the books before, you know that their fifth density assassin was trying to kill Carla to disrupt things, to stop the communication between Ra and her, or kill anyone in the group as well. And eventually, Dawn did end up with colon cancer, and eventually he ended up killing himself, shot himself in the head, and died in 1984. And it did sever forever Carla's ability to communicate with Ra. So from that point on, Carla was able to communicate with many other beings, but never the hive mind complex calling themselves Ra. However, they are still around because they are part of the Galactic Council. Some of you know them as the Orion Council of Light, and down here we are the Orion Coalition of Light. Down here on the planet, or just the Orion Coalition, with the Orion Coalition of Light. In the physical, and the council attached to the Galactic Council, whatever you know that as, the Council of Venus, the Council of 10, the Galactic Council, in any case. So the assassin was trying to kill Carla, is still around. There are more than just that one, and they do try to eliminate anyone who is trying to communicate this kind of information to the general population of this earth from the fifth density, sometimes in the third and sometimes in the fourth, and trying to make things look like accidents to where you die mysteriously, or you just die and they go, oh yeah, the appendix burst or something like that happens, and it looks normal, stroke, heart attack, whatever it is, and it looks normal. But if on an astral level, I never believed that at first until other people were actually telling me that was happening. I've told that story about being in the hospital, having to have an emergency surgery, and then having a psychic who was on the east coast of the United States appear before me in the operating room, and I thought I was just under, the gas, about ready to go unconscious. And I thought that's weird that I brought her into my, falling asleep right then, only to have afterwards, after I got out of recovery and was back in my room, my cell phone to ring and for her to call me from New York. I was out here in California. Call me from New York and ask me if I remember seeing her in the operating room before I went out from the gas. And I said, yeah, I thought that was a dream. She said, no, they were trying to murder you. They were trying to kill you. They were trying to assassinate you. And I was called in to defend you, to stop them from doing that. And I brought people to defend you against the assassins trying to kill you on the operating table and make it look like you just died on the operating table. And I was like, wow, okay, so that is a thing. And she was like, yeah, no, they were trying to kill you. And I'm glad that you're okay. I just want to let you know, yes, that really happened. That was me. It wasn't a dream. Okay, let's continue here.
Questioner, is the sensor that we have provided all right? It does go out prior to the end of the session. Would it be better if it did not go out prior to the end of the session? Answer, I am Ra. The new configuration of the sensor is quite helpful to the more subtle patterns of energy surrounding these workings. It would be helpful to have a continuously burning amount of sense. However, the difficulty is in providing this without overpowering this enclosure with the amount of effluvium and physical product of combustion. Having to choose betwixt allowing the sensor to finish its burning and having an overabundance of the smoke, we would suggest the former as being more helpful. Question 88.5. Questioner, the instrument has mentioned what she refers to as breathe-through or being aware during these sessions sometimes of the communication. Would you comment on this? Answer, I am Ra. We have the mind, body, spirit complex of the instrument with us. As this entity begins to awaken from the metaphorical crib of experiencing light and activity in our density, it is beginning to be aware of the movement of thought. It does not grasp these thoughts any more than your third density infant may grasp the first words it perceives. The experience should be expected to continue and is an appropriate outgrowth of the nature of these workings and of the method by which this instrument has made itself available to our words. Question 88.6.
Right. So literally, when you first delve into that concept of communication, some of you out there, some of you in the audience have also expressed talking, using light language and speaking in light language and not realizing it. That happens because communication from soul to soul is not done in English. It's not done in any language that's down here on this earth. It's actually done in light language, and the different species or regions of where people are from, even in their soul, communicate in a language that is an energetic vibration that is akin to a vocal vibration that we hear through our ears, but it's a vibration that is transmitted from one spirit to the other, from one soul to the other. So it communicates an entire concept of thought to one another, and that sometimes people start picking up on, and then they start saying things down here in the light language, and it starts coming through in different ways that doesn't sound like any language that we have down here, because it's as close a sound that we can make to what's going on in the thought processes of our soul. It's only when your brain grabs a hold of it and translates it for you that you think it in English. But the concept comes in before that, and that's part of the ascension process, or I should say part of the ascension process is recognizing that part of yourself that happens during just prior to a thought that you have, that you become aware of your higher self actually coming up with the entire concept and communicating the entire concept, and then the brain, your physical brain, grabs a hold of it and translates it and thinks it into words. So once you start being able to discern that, it's part of your ascension where you can actually hear yourself think, or you perceive yourself thinking the entire concept as the soul, and then your mind thinks it in whatever language that you speak. But you'll find that if you have memory of being a person, a human, before your human body was able to speak, you will know that you were already thinking prior to that, and you have memory of doing that. So how is it that you can think language or think in a language that you haven't even learned yet, but you can understand everything that's going on? I remember that. I remember not being able to speak. With my physical body, I couldn't get my mouth to say the words that I wanted to say because I was an infant, but I understood everything that was being said around me. I remember everything that my mother said, my father said, and my mom was having a conversation with my grandmother at one point who my grandmother was asking me what I did during the day, and I was trying to tell her what I did, and she realized, "Oh, listen to him. He's trying to tell me his whole day. He's just going on." But the only sounds that were coming out were baby sounds. I was, and that was all I was getting out of my mouth. But in my mind, I was actually telling her what was going on, what I had done in the day, and she couldn't understand me because I couldn't get my physical body to say anything yet. It's the same as if you have memory of not being able to walk yet, and you know what you're trying to do, and you know what everyone's trying to make you do, but you don't have the coordination because you haven't built up the muscle tissue and the coordination with the muscles in your body to be able to start crawling and then stand up and hold yourself up and not fall over and be able to start then balancing and walking. It's the same thing with language. So if anyone out there has that memory, but they're not sure if they're awake yet, but you have the memory of not being able to walk, and you know that, and you have the memory of when you were really little and not being able to say the words yet, but you were still thinking, that is something in you that you should tap into to realize that you're something more than this physical plane, because you had abilities that you couldn't physically do yet because the body that you were in didn't have the capabilities because you hadn't figured out how to make the body do those things yet. Okay. So, yeah, right. So Cassie said, I remember being in the womb and understanding as well what was going on. Yeah, I was in the womb, and I was telling my mother to read more scientific research. My mother, if she were capable of giving you this information, she did when she was younger, but now she's, she has dementia, so she doesn't speak much anymore at all. But she used to tell the story that because scientists had realized that women, when they're pregnant, and their fathers and the mother, when the woman is pregnant, if they talk to the child and tell the child things, the child comes out smarter. And if the mother, it reads even out loud or to herself, scientific journals and scientific things, and in mathematics, and the child learns that stuff from the mother through proxy from the mother reading it. It's communicated to the child. They have an easier time when they come out as a baby, as they're growing up, to actually learn language, to learn science, to learn mathematics, to learn reading, to know what's going on in the world. So those of us who have the memory of actually being awake, then we have an advanced knowledge of information. You saw that play out. Let me turn my camera back on here instead of looking at the raw. You saw that playing out if you watched Superman, the movie that came out way back in the 70s or 80s, whenever that came out, when I was a little boy. When it was in the 70s, I think. But they show you that when Superman was a baby and they stuck him because there was a war and their planet was going to be destroyed because the bad guys were fighting and they were going to blow it up, and they stuck Superman. I don't remember what his actual name was at the time before we called him Superman. The Clark Kent character, but when he was a baby, they stuck him in a pod, a spaceship, and then jettisoned him to save his life and sent him to Earth, where they knew that he would be able to excel because it was a yellow ray sun. And the whole time he was coming here, he was being educated as a baby inside that pod, constantly talking to him, teaching him things. And when he was literally just born, he was months old, not even a month old yet. So when he landed on Earth, he got out. He was probably 4 years old or something like that, 3 or 4. He was very little, in diapers. So he was probably 1 or 2. He was in diapers, and literally he wasn't wearing any diaper. He got out, he was naked, so they didn't have a diaper on him. But he literally was being sustained. His life force was being sustained, and he was being educated. while he was there, and he didn't even know how to walk yet, couldn't talk yet, but it was like being in a womb, and he was being educated. So science has realized and proven that children that have memories of being in the womb, or a mother and a father who were very caring and talked to the child and read to the child and was teaching the child as if the child was already born, mathematics, language, things like that, that the child, when they're born, has a higher IQ and has less learning disabilities, unless they're, smokers or drinkers or drug addicts. And even if they're still doing it, it's going to help the child a little bit. But science has actually proven that. So they tell people now, in books and seminars and videos, that you should interact with your child as if your child is born, talk to it, and it can hear you. It knows that you're there, even if it's veiled and it doesn't remember it, you're still going to be giving your child an advantage by doing so, right? Peter said, I remember being in the womb, coming across the water to go from England to Ireland. He said I was going back to England, where my birth let it be where my parents were written in England. Peter's talking to his phone with his Irish accent, and it's not translating it exactly right. When Plastic, Patty, and I, good and proud. So I'm not exactly sure, Peter. We lost the last part of that, but Peter said he remembers being in the womb and going from England to Ireland, Ireland to England, going across the water. Has that memory? So he remembers at the very least that moment, probably of most of what was going on, right? And then Brooke says, I've also seen that if you chant Om during pregnancy, when the baby is born, the react to an instinct relaxation meditative state when you Om to them, right? So literally, if you're doing that because of that, especially if the mother does that, I would say, but even if the father does, but the mother more so, because it resonates through the body when you do that. So if the mother does that, that sound is going to resonate through her body to the child, and if she's doing it to relax, the child will relax. So yeah, I'm guarantee, Brooke, that you're absolutely 100% accurate, and the science probably is aware of that they would then calm down, so that if a child was, say, upset and not wanting to go to sleep, I'll bet if the parents picked the child up trying to get it to quiet down, if they then went Om and held the child, I'll bet the child would relax a lot faster to move into that Om state, that meditative relaxation state, guaranteed 100%, right? So I was unaware of that, Brooke, that part of it, but it makes complete sense when you. So I don't doubt it at all. I guarantee that you're 100% accurate, because that sound resonating through the mother's body. By that, I remember as a child, when I was a baby, little teeny baby, my father had me sitting on his chest, and he was talking, and I could feel as well as hear his voice. So I could hear the vibration coming through his chest into my right ear, and I could hear his voice because my head was right here. I could hear his voice coming through my left ear, but I could feel the vibration of his voice coming through his body into my body at the same time. And I remember that today. I remember that. And I remember how that felt, because my father was always a very stoic and very calm person. And he was talking to somebody, and I was sleeping on his body. And I remember I wasn't actually asleep, and I was just laying there on his chest while he was talking. And I remember him talking. I remember what he was saying, but I could feel the vibration coming from his body. And I could feel his heartbeat as well, because he had me laying on his heart. So my heart was pressed against my father's heart, and I was laying on him, and I could, that bonding, it was a lot of bonding right then from that. So the Om sound would make way more sense. So they're starting to realize, let's get into this a little bit. They're starting to realize that the things that you do before the birthing process affect the child and the development of the child in a physical and a psychological way, to give them advantages. So when you look at some races who are a little bit more ahead of that game, like the Asian races, where they have all these kids that are like brilliant and they play violin and piano and all of this, and people are like, how is it that these kids are doing that? Because the parents, if you ask them, the parents are teaching them that stuff, playing that music and teaching that stuff when the child is in the womb. They're aware of it in some cultures, and they practice it in some cultures, because the cultures that they're in are not controlling their people and keeping that information from them. And that's part of what's going on in this world, where the people who are in control and believe they own this planet are keeping information away from you. And that's some of the information that they're keeping away from you. And this is exactly what Ra came through Carla, came through the LL research group to explain to you, to warn you of what's going on. And this is a perfect opportunity for me to go ahead and do a commercial for my book, because that's what my book talks about. So I'm going to go ahead and play the commercial for my book. For those of you listening around the world, you'll be able to hear it, but won't be able to see the visuals. So you got to pay the bills. So here's a commercial for The Reality About Reality, Returning to the Old Ways.
What is the reality about reality? Returning to the Old Ways. It is a comprehensive book about what is really going on here on this planet. It talks about the true spirituality that the controllers who think they own this planet have been keeping from you for thousands of years. It explains to you the knowledge that you gain from the universe itself when you live the way the prophets of the world throughout time told us how to live. Eat right, meditate, take care of yourself, treat others right. All the things they originally told us to do, but the controllers have removed from right in front of our eyes. The way to ascend to heaven. The reality about reality. Returning to the Old Ways. On sale worldwide, online now.
So the information that's in that book is going to give you a lot of the physicality of what's going on and spirituality of what's going on this world, which is what Ra was warning about when they came through in 1981 to 1984, talking about the very same thing, and me furthering that, being of the Ra Collective, furthering that with showing you just exactly what they're doing and showing you how the religions have been stifled, how the Orion Coalition, you may know them as the Orion Crusaders, you may know them as the Anunnaki, came down to Earth with the knowledge to give to these people that are down here to take over, to control this matrix and what's going on, and why this place is in the condition that it's in now. But it's in a far better place now than it was 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, even 10,000 years ago. Far better position now, because their reign is over. They've been gone for a long time. Now it's just the people down here who believe that they are descendants of the Lucifer and the Luciferians, that are, thinking that they're ruling this planet and own it. That's what they believe. So if you have, getting back on point, so if you're out there in the world and you're going to have children, be aware of these processes. You can look them up and help your child while it's in the womb. If you guys are drinkers, smokers, drug addicts, stop all that stuff beforehand. You're going to have a lot better time with the child and a lot better time, getting pregnant and doing that. And then remember those things and look those holistic things up to tell your child, give your child the benefit of extra knowledge and even music and everything. And in doing so, you're going to give your child a greater advantage to prosper on this earth in some way, and even better, possibly better the people. There are other society, better themselves and society. There are other races of beings on other planets that don't allow this kind of thing to happen. And like here, where you get stuck, and they actually do that exact thing. They teach their children in the womb and give them those tools so that they have a better advancement and an easier advancement when they come out and they start learning. They learn faster and don't have any issues and stuff like that. Okay, let's get back to, let me go back over here and put this up in the full screen, and we'll get back into the Law of One.
Questioner: the instrument mentioned a recurrence of the need to go to the bathroom prior to the session. Is this because of the low vital energy? Answer: I am Ra. It is part of the cause of the lowered vital energy level. This entity has been sustaining a level of the distortion you call pain which few among your peoples experience without significant training of the energies. Indeed, the stability of the entity is notable. However, the entity has thusly become drained and further has felt other distortions such as those for a variety of experiences accentuated, for this is one means of balancing the inward-looking experience of the physical pain. Due to concern for this entity, such activities have been discouraged. This has further drained the entity. The will to be of service to the Creator through the means of offering itself as instrument in these working, therefore, was given an opportunity for the testing of resolve. This entity used some vital energy to fuel and replenish the will. No physical energy has been used by the instrument, but the vital energies were tapped so that this entity might have the opportunity to once again consciously choose to serve the one infinite Creator.
Okay, so Peter was able to give me the breakdown of what he was trying to say when his computer wasn't picking it up. And he said, my birth certificate was written in England. He said, I'm English and Irish. To bring me back across the sea in 1971. I was born on international waters. But back then, if you were born on international waters or on the sea, he said that to bring you back to your last destination, that's what he meant. So he was saying that, and he remembers that when he was in the womb, he remembers going from getting the paperwork in England and coming back to Ireland and being born in international waters. He remembers that happening, and then he became a citizen when he landed. So he was over in Ireland, and he became a citizen when he got there. Back then, you could do that. Well, that's the same with the United States. If you're born to on a vessel, say that's owned by the United States, and your parents are Americans, but you're in Japan, or you're on a military base in Japan, you're still an American citizen. And that's how they do that, even in the United States. So my buddy Paul, who is deceased now, he was born in Japan, but he was born in a hospital on a ship, an American vessel, because his mother and father were in the Navy. So he was born in Japan. They were stationed there, but he was born to two American parents, and he was born on American territory. And because he was born to two American parents, and they were in the military overseas serving the United States, he was automatically a United States citizen. And then when he came back home to the United States, then that made it even more apparent. Yes, they're not, didn't keep him overseas. But he was technically born in Japan, right? But he wasn't Japanese because he was born on American soil there. But he could have been Japanese had he been born in a Japanese hospital. And then they could have done the same thing, brought him back to the United States and made him a citizen because they were serving overseas. And America would accept that as him being an American, even when he was born in Japan. So he wouldn't be Japanese, he would still be American. So the same thing as what Peter's saying, and he has memory of that as an infant. Okay, let's continue here.
Question 88.7. Questioner, is the small crystal that the instrument uses upon her during the session of any benefit or detriment? Answer, I am Ra. This crystal is beneficial as long as he who has charged it is functioning in a positively oriented manner. Question 88.8. Questioner, who charged the crystal? Answer, I am Ra. This crystal was charged for use by this instrument by the one known as Neil. Question 88.9. Questioner, it would be an abridgment of the first distortion for you to tell us if he is still functioning in a positive manner, would it not? Answer, I am Ra. We perceive you have replied to your own query. Question 88.10. Questioner, our publisher requests pictures for the book, The Law of One, that is going to press at this time. Would you comment on the advisability, the benefit, or detriment, magical or otherwise, of us using pictures of this particular setup, the instrument, and the appurtenances in the book? Answer, I am Ra. The practical advisability of such a project is completely a product of your discrimination. There are magical considerations. Firstly, if pictures be taken of the working, the visual image must needs be that which is, that is, it is well for you to photograph only an actual working and no sham nor substitution of any material. There shall be no distortions which this group can avoid any more than we would wish distortions in our words. Secondly, it is inadvisable to photograph the instrument or any portion of the working room while the instrument is in trance. This is a narrow band contact, and we wish to keep electrical and electromagnetic energies constant when their presence is necessary and not present at all otherwise. Question 88.11.
There is pictures on their website, not when they were actually doing a session, but when they were getting ready to. I have on my Facebook page, if you go back in my photos, but you'll have to go back to like 2017, 2018 in my photos, but there's pictures of Carla laying in the bed. They're in black and white, laying in the bed with her, laying there with the covers over her and the little cassette recorder sitting on her chest with a little microphone sitting there to record what she was saying. And she's laying there with her eyes closed with the stuff behind her, the little altar that they made with the Bible and the incense and the candles and stuff behind her. So you can see that if you go to their website, you can see the pictures of that. And I believe that those were also printed in the books. I never read that. I never actually had the books, the physical copies of the books to read, but I did read, all of them. And then I did them with this as well, but I never owned the actual physical books. Okay, let's continue. But you can see photos, they're online, of Carla back then when she was channeling Ra.
Questioner, I'm sorry. Go ahead. If you meant to continue, continue. If not, I'll ask a question. Answer, I am Ra. We wish to state, thirdly, that once the instrumental is aware that the picture taking will be performed, that during the entire picture taking, whether before or after the working, the instrument be required to continuously respond to speech, thus assuring that no trance is imminent. Question 88.12. Questioner, from what you have told me, then, I have planned the following. We will, after the session is complete and the instrument has been awakened, and before moving the instrument, have the instrument continually talk to us while I take pictures. In addition to this, I will take some other pictures as requested by the publisher. Is this the optimal filling of this requirement? Answer, I am Ra. Yes. We ask that any photographs tell the truth, that they be dated and shine with a clarity so that there is no shadow of any but genuine expression which may be offered to those which seek truth. We come as humble messengers of the law of one, desiring to decrease distortions. We ask that you, who have been our friends, work with any considerations such as above discussed, not with the thought of quickly removing an unimportant detail, but, as in all ways, regard such as another opportunity to, as the adeptmost, be yourselves and offer that which is in and with you without pretense of any kind. Question 88.13. Questioner, thank you. I would like to ask you as to the initial production of the tarot, where this concept was first formed and where the tarot was first recorded. Answer, I am Ra. The concept of the tarot originated within the planetary influence you call Venus. Question 88.14. Questioner, was the concept given to or devised for a training tool for those inhabiting Venus at that time, or was it devised by those of Venus as a training tool for those of Earth? Answer, I am Ra. The tarot was devised by the third density population of Venus, a great measure of your space-time in your past. As we have noted, the third density experience of those of Venus dealt far more deeply and harmoniously with what you would call relationships with other selves, sexual energy transfer work, and philosophical or metaphysical research. The product of many, many generations of work upon what we conceived to be the archetypical mind produced the tarot, which was used by our peoples as a training aid in developing the magical personality. Question 88.15.
Right, so the tarot cards were not originated here on Earth. They were originally developed in this solar system on the planet Venus, when the planet Venus had human or had third dimensional beings on it. They don't currently anymore. Venus only has, I think it's 7 and 8. So it was a very, very long time ago when that planet was in a cycle to where third dimensional beings like on Earth, were on that planet. And that's where in this solar system, that's where the tarot cards originated. And eventually some of the souls from there ended up down on Earth, and they brought that information with them down on Earth. And Ra brought that information down on Earth to the Egyptians when their consciousness came here 12,000 years ago. During that time period, they gave that information to the Egyptians, who then wrote made the tarot cards. And one of the oldest versions, Reese, who, if he's still here because he was here earlier, Reese has just currently bought one of the older versions of the tarot cards on the Earth. He had a deck a long time ago because Reese has been following me. He and I've been friends since 2017 when I first started doing the tarot deck, and he found one of the older. I think it was older than the ones he has now. And he had it, and then it disappeared. He doesn't know what happened to it. So he went out and found another very old version of the deck, expensive too. By the way, I haven't gotten one yet, but I want to get a deck just like that one, a really old one, and they're expensive. And he had one of those that are one of the first versions of the tarot cards that were created on, and replicas of it. Of course, not one of the actuals, because that'd be worth a lot of money. But Reese has that. So originally, the tarot cards were invented by invented by third dimensional beings on the planet Venus, when that planet sustained third dimensional life forms, which we do here now, but we didn't then at the time. Okay. And that information came here with members that were on Venus at the time. And that is currently where the Galactic Council is there on Venus currently. But it's actually a fifth dimensional, sixth dimensional, seventh dimensional, and some eighth dimensional beings that are part of that Galactic Council that's there. So it's out of phase with us. We could go to Venus right now and we wouldn't be able to find any of those civilizations because they're at a higher vibration than we are. They're actually at a slower rate of speed because the vibration of the third dimension is closer to the speed of light than any other vibration. So here was the first place we're self-aware, but our vibration is super fast. And because of that, that's how we have past, present, and future separated. You're actually slow down, right? Right? Yeah. Reese is still here. It's amazing how long ago tarot is from. Yeah. So we're talking millions and millions of years, maybe even billions of years, hundreds of millions of years ago when that was created. And there was human life millions of years ago. They've proven it. I haven't vetted it, but I've seen videos where they talk about finding people in different places buried. There's a couple of them, and I haven't fully vetted to find out but I can tell you the theory of it, what they claim. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's been ever really truly vetted, but some people say yeah. But they found a female buried in the ground in, I think, Russia, and she was inside of a sarcophagus, and they could see her in the sarcophagus, and she was very beautiful, young, in her 20s, humanoid, bipedal, blonde hair, blue eyes, really pale skin. They think her eyes were blue because her eyes weren't open, but they think because she had every look of a Nordic, and she wasn't really tall, but she was wearing garments that were very beautiful and shiny, but we had never seen, not in a fabric that we know. And they dated where she was to 5 million years ago. Okay. And pardon me. And they decided to open up the sarcophagus so that they could get a look at her and test her and all that stuff to find out what was going on. She was in this pink liquid. I think they said it was a pink liquid. She was submerged in that. And when they opened up the sarcophagus to actually expose her to air, she immediately withered right before their eyes. And I don't think she turned to dust, but she withered away. And it was hard for them to test her DNA, but they were able to figure out that She was a humanoid, and she was at least 5 million years old. And she wasn't the only body buried like that. So they don't know for certain if there was a civilization on Earth, but they do know that people were buried here because they found at least 3 or 4 other sarcophagi as well with humans in it. A male, I think 2 men, at least two men, 2 women, and I'm not sure about the 5th one, whether it was a man or a woman, but at least 2 and 2 more. So there was 5. So it was at least 2 women, 2 men, including her, but I don't know what the other one was that they found. But they have those, according to what I heard and read, they didn't open the other sarcophagi because they were knowing that the chances are the same thing would happen. But they were dated. One was dated to 11 million years ago, so they don't know for 100% certainty that there were civilizations on Earth then. But there are other things like that hammer that they found, and a few other things that they found that were inside of rock that was dated to 2 to 5 million years ago. And so that item shouldn't have been there, even if it was an item from the modern time that got caught in a volcano and didn't get burnt up and ended up with rock around it, or fell down a crevasse, a crack in the earth and ended up getting smooshed into something, and then somebody finding it. It wouldn't be able to be mummified in a way that it was. So it's weird how parallel, like the hammer was by hammers that we have here on Earth in the last just 3,000 years. So the science is like, well, if we have it, then it's not from an old civilization, because they're for some reason assuming that somebody who lived 1 million years ago would have never developed the exact way that we developed here now. So therefore, because they must have been more advanced than us, so they wouldn't be using the same crude tools. But we have crude tools, and then we advanced in 1,000 years, literally went from covered wagon to space in 50 years on this Earth. So why would some other civilization not have the same advancements that we did? But I digress. Okay, let's continue here, right? And go forward. But like I said, I haven't seen that with my own physical eyes, but I have read the files on it. And there's videos out there that will tell you about what I was just talking about. And there is no disclaimer saying this is untrue. There is nobody in the chat from the video going, this is a lie, it was made up. There's actual photos of the people that found the sarcophagus and photos of the sarcophagus. So they're out there and you can find them. So humans have been at least buried on Earth for millions of years, if not actually on Earth having civilizations over and over and over. And if you talk to the Aborigines in Australia, the Aboriginal people will tell you that this is the 7th cycle of the human condition on this Earth, which means that the flood that we know of, Noah's flood, was just the cycle that we're now in the one before us ending. And we then go back further, and we now know that 77,000 years ago, there was a cataclysm, and there was a group of people that lived before that ended 77,000 years ago. Okay, and if you read the Colburn Bible in Scotland, Colburn with a K, Colburn with a B, Colburn Bible, the first 6 books of the Colburn Bible apparently came out of Egypt with Moses during the Exodus, and they got a hold of them, found them in somewhere in either the Middle East or in Rome or the Vatican, and they took copies of them and took them back to Scotland and added them to their Bible called the Colburn Bible in Scotland. And that tells of at least 2 other past the flood, 2 other destructions of the earth, where the earth, almost everybody on the earth died during a calamity. And so the information's out there that our civilization that we are currently living in is less than 70,000 years old. More than likely, it's more likely about 14,000 years old or 12,000 years old. That because that would have been about the time when the flood happened. So we also know there was another one in between 77,000 years ago and now. And we're kind of equating ourselves with that one. And we also know that when you look at Egypt and you look at what Robert Schoch talked about that the Sphinx more than likely was built 128,000 years ago. Okay, so that means that the society that died off 77,000 years ago may have lived from 77,000 years ago, may have gone back as far as 126,000 years prior to that, without a calamity. So they may have lived for 70 some odd thousand years, 75,000 years, and then they may have been destroyed. And when you couple that information with the information of wanderers sign on for a time period of 77,000 years or 128,000 years in cycles to help a society get out from being stuck. Okay, so it's rare that wanderers come through that don't sign on for a long time unless it's crunched down to the last few lifetimes, and then a bunch of people show up, like what's happened here in the last 40 years, the whole last 50, 60 years on this planet, where we've gone from 2.7 billion humans on the Earth to now 8 billion humans on the Earth, and it's taken less than 50 years to get that population explosion. That's usually synonymous with the closer you get to the end of a cycle, and that's what we're shooting for here, is that by 2050 things are going to be back on track to where when people die they don't have to return anymore and they can actually go to the next level. Okay, so that's what we're shooting for at this point, and we're believing that that's what the timeline is set for. So we know that for those of you out there that are tired and you might be hearing my voice, this may be the last life that you may have to be recycled in the third dimension if you do the work, and you can actually go into the fourth dimension when you die in this life. By 2050, if you're around by then, between 2035 and 2050, you'll start being able to transition. You won't have to come back and be stuck down here anymore, because we're fixing this place so that you guys have those tools back in place, so that you can, when you die, you can move on to another existence the way you're supposed to. Okay, so for those of you out there in the world that are listening, and you're tired and you feel like you've been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and you're like, I'm tired of this and I just want to go home, do the work, because there's a very, 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 very good possibility. There's a 100% possibility that if you do the work, you'll be able to, when you die in this life, move to the next one, not being recycled as a human and being born here again. But if you don't do the work and you can't graduate, then you'll just move to another planet and you'll get, veiled again, and you won't even know that you were ever on Earth. So that's just the way that works. Okay, let's continue let's put the raw back up here and continue with the law of one, right? Here we go.
Questioner: I'll make a guess that those of Venus of third density who were the initial ones to partially penetrate the veil gleaned information as to the nature of the archetypical mind and the veiling process, and from this designed the tarot as a method of teaching others. Is this correct? Answer: I am Ra. It is so. Question 88.16. Questioner: I will also assume, and I may not be correct, that the present list that I have of 22 names of the tarot cards of the major arcana are not in exact agreement with Ra's original generation of the tarot. Could you describe the original tarot, first telling me if there were 22 archetypes? That must have been the same. Were they the same as the list that I read to you in a previous session, or were there differences? Answer: I am Ra. As we have stated previously, each archetype is a concept complex and may be viewed not only by individuals but by those of the same racial and planetary influences in unique ways. Therefore, it is not informative to reconstruct the rather minor differences in descriptive terms between the tarot used by us and that used by those of Egypt and the spiritual descendants of those first students of this system of study. The one great breakthrough which was made after our work in third density was the proper emphasis given to the arcanum number 22, which we have called the choice. In our own experience, we were aware that such an unifying archetype existed, but did not give that archetype the proper complex of concepts in order to most efficaciously use that archetype in order to promote our evolution.
All right, so that's the end of part one of session 88. So
This guy is claiming that not only has he met an extraterrestrial, but he channels one.
There we go. So let me do that. Okay, so then we'll go ahead and we'll restart this next session. Session 88, question, what are we on? Question 17 of the Law of One. So let's continue here. This is part 2, video part 2.
Question 88.17. Questioner, I will make this statement as to my understanding of some of the archetypes and let you correct this statement. It seems to me that the significators of mind, body, and spirit are acted upon in each of these by the catalyst. This produces experience, which then leads to the transformation and produces the great way. This is the same process for the mind, the body, and spirit. The archetypes are just repeated but act in a different way as catalyst because of the differences of mind, body, and spirit, and produce a different type of experience for each because of the difference in the three. The transformation is slightly different. The great way is somewhat different, but the archetypes are all basically doing the same thing. They are just acting on three different portions of the mind, body, spirit complex, so that we can say that in making the significator a complex, basically we have provided a way for catalyst to create the transformation more efficiently. Would you correct that statement, please? Answer, I am Ra. In your statement, correctness is so platted up with tendrils of the most fundamental misunderstanding that correction of your statement is difficult. We shall make comments, and from these comments request that you allow possible realignment of conceptualization to occur. The archetypical mind is a great and fundamental portion of the mind complex, one of its most basic elements and one of the richest sources of information for the seeker of the one infinite creator. To attempt to condense the archetypes is to make an erroneous attempt. Each archetype is a significant ding and sitch, all thing in itself, with its own complex of concepts. While it is informative to survey the relationships of one archetype to another, it can be said that this line of inquiry is secondary to the discovery of the purest gestalt or vision or melody which each archetype signifies to both the intellectual and intuitive mind. The significators of mind, body, and spirit complexes are complex in and of themselves, and the archetypes of catalyst, experience, transformation, and the great way are most fruitfully viewed as independent complexes which have their own melodies with which they may inform the mind of its nature. We ask.
Right, so you have to realize that trying to skip over, I talk about this all the time, people are always saying, oh, we're moving into 5D, we're moving into 10D, we're moving into 12D, right? And I constantly am saying, look, you can't fool the universe, you can't skip over things, right? And this is what Ra is saying right here, that you have to realize the weight of each archetype. Each archetype means the chakras. Each chakra represents an archetype, right? A personality trait that is in the physical plane, moving through the physical plane with the red ray root chakra, the orange ray, the sacral, the yellow ray, then going into the green and all the way up. All the chakras, everything above the heart chakra is the spiritual chakras. Everything below the heart chakra, so the three below are physical plane chakras. The three above are spiritual plane chakras. The heart chakra, it's the Visika Pisces, the yin and the yang. The heart chakra is the overlapping for both, because if you're in service to self, you're in the lower three chakras, but you do love. You love yourself. So you access the heart chakra, but it's love, self-love. If you are in service to others, then you are in the spiritual place, and you're not living in the physical realm. You're more in the spiritual realm. So you're in the upper three chakras. Again, the heart chakra is overlapping there because it rules the upper three chakras as well as the bottom three chakras, because you're in service to others. You love others as you love yourself. So therefore, the heart chakra is the focal point. That is the sixth energy, because the actual names for the chakras are numbers, more importantly in vibration for the chakras, are not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They are in fact 3, 4, 5, 6, being the heart chakra, 7, 8, 9. And if you look at that and you say, well, where does that apparent? As I mentioned before, in the oldest scroll that talks about the chakras, older than anything else on this earth, and that is the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the archetypes, even spoken that way, the gods that rule the archetypes of humans are named 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9. Worded that way, with the only place where the word "and" is on the heart chakra, 6. 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9. And that is exactly the way Thoth wrote that down and said it. So when you readjust your thinking to that, it makes more sense as to what's going on in the universe and in the world. And anybody who knows a lot about the chakras and are very spiritual, whenever I explain that to them and say those things to them and readjust your alignment, it actually activates them in a different way. And then all of a sudden they go, wait, what? And the whole universe clicks into place. And that's part of the corruption. The reverse being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is part of the corruption, like the as above, so below, as without, so within is a corruption of the true saying, which is as below, so above, as within, so without. Okay. And that's even spoken in the Bible that way. If you look at Matthew 18 and you read in there, you'll see that God is saying, what you sow on earth, I shall too sow in heaven, as below, so above. What you reap on earth, I shall too reap in heaven, as below, so above, as within, so without. So even in the Christian Bible, it was described as below, so above, as within, so without, not the other way around. Corrupted by the Orion Crusaders' knowledge for the people, the oligarchs, the 1% oligarchs who rule this planet and believe they own it, they believe they own this earth. They corrupt everything in all spiritual practices that they can to change things to the caste system of one person in charge at the top and everybody else beneath that person. The maritime law caste system with a king, a pharaoh, a dictator, a president, a monarch, whatever you want to call them, a prime minister, whatever you call that, one person being in charge, governmental body at the higher table, and you being the plebes down below, the slaves down below, right? So they corrupt everything in that manner. And so here Ra is talking about that information and saying, right, that very thing, the knowledge of this is the catalyst for the experience of the transformation, as I'm reading, right, of the great way. So to know this knowledge is to unlock what's going on. Let me rewind it just a tad so you can hear Ra state this. I'll go back about 10 seconds here and come back forward. Maybe I should go back a little bit more, another 10 seconds or so, and then let Ra state that again so you understand what I'm saying here.
The significators of mind, body, and spirit complexes are complex in and of themselves, and the archetypes of catalyst, experience, transformation, and the great way are most fruitfully viewed as independent complexes which have their own melodies with which they may inform the mind of its nature. We ask that you consider that the archetypical mind informs those thoughts which then may have bearing upon the mind, the body, or the spirit. The archetypes do not have a direct linkage to body or spirit. All must be drawn up through the higher levels of the subconscious mind to the conscious mind, and thence they may flee whither they have been bidden to go. When used in a controlled way, they are most helpful. Rather than continue beyond the boundaries of your prior statement, we would appreciate the opportunity for your questioning at this time so that we may answer you more precisely.
Right. So in the tarot, this is where Ra's getting to in the tarot cards, right? Chandra, welcome. In the tarot cards, they cover the archetypes, all these archetypes that are the same as the chakras. You have to realize that. Okay. So you have to realize that literally the archetypes of the divination cards, that is the tarot cards, are the chakras, and the categories are the same categories of physicality and then going up to spirituality. And with like the cups, wands, depends on, but you'll see that you have force of nature, you have red ray root chakra, you have things of doing, you have all the things that represent the same. And I talk about that in the new book that I'm writing, where I break that down for you when I'm actually translating the scrolls, like the letters to the churches in the revelation of the Bible, or I'm actually giving you the description of what each chakra it represents, you can look that up for yourself. And then coinciding it with the letter to the churches and showing you that there's 7 letters to the churches. There was 7 original plagues of Moses from God to the Egyptians, and then the Hebrews added 3 more. You can look that up. It's not something that I made up. 7 chakras, 7 plagues. If you look at the letters to the churches, it's about the chakras. If you do what God says, then you get into heaven. It's the same as the gates, the spells of the Book of the Dead, of going through the gates and knowing the name of the guardian of the gate, the God representing in the gate, knowing its true name. That is knowing what that chakra is and balancing the chakra. And you have to understand the riddle of each gate and know what to say and know what mindset to be in to then move to the next gate. And there are 7 of those gates, 7 chakras. Same thing. It's balancing your chakras to get into heaven. If you can't balance your chakras, you don't get to go into heaven. You have to what? Be recycled and start on earth again. Look up the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and you'll see that that's the lessons that are being taught in there. It's balance your chakras, or you don't get to go through the gate, and you end up not going to heaven, and you're stuck in what they would call their version of purgatory, which was being stuck and recycling on this earth, right? So I talk about that information in the next book that will be out probably next year. I was hoping to get it out as early as next year, somewhere in June or July of next year. We'll see. Maybe later than that, because I haven't finished writing it yet. I've only just started, so I'm only really truly on chapter 1. It's taken me longer to put that together than I wanted, but I realized why, and it's okay. So it'll be out eventually. But for the beginning, you could buy my first book and read that and learn more knowledge about what's going on before I get into the comparative of what's going on around the world and what has gone on around the world. All right, let's continue.
Question 88.18. Questioner, did Ra use cards similar to the tarot cards for training in 3rd density? Answer, I am Ra. No. Question 88.19. Questioner, what did Ra use in 3rd density? Answer, I am Ra. You are aware in your attempts at magical visualization of the mental configuration of sometimes rather complex visualizations. These are mental and drawn with the mind. Another example well known in your culture is the visualization, in your mass, of the distortion of the love of the one infinite creator called Christianity, wherein a small portion of your foodstuffs is seen to be a mentally configured but entirely real man, the man known to you as Jehoshua, or, as you call this entity now, Jesus. It was by this method of sustained visualization over a period of training that we worked with these concepts. These concepts were occasionally drawn. However, the concept of one visualization per card was not thought of by us.
Okay, so just to be clear here, the tarot cards were originally created by the soul that was Jesus Christ on this planet. Okay, just so you know. That's what, and let me replay that so you understand that. Okay, so I'll replay that. So Jesus, before Jesus was incarnate on earth, let me go back here at least to here, and we'll replay what he was talking about right there. Okay, so what did Ra use in 3rd density? Okay, so you are aware of your attempts to the magical visualization of the mental configuration. So we'll replay that. Okay, let's see where he is here.
Is seen to be a mentally configured but entirely culture is the visualization, in your mass, of the distortion of the love of the one infinite creator called Christianity, wherein a small boundaries of your prior statement.
Backing up a little bit more and let it read, so let it play so you guys can hear it. I kept playing it and then being halfway through. Okay, so literally you'll see. Let me play it, then we'll come back and talk about it.
We would appreciate the opportunity for your questioning at this time so that we may answer you more precisely. Question 88.18. Questioner, did Ra use cards similar to the tarot cards for training in 3rd density? Answer, I am Ra. No. Question 88.19. Questioner, what did Ra use in 3rd density? Answer, I am Ra. You are aware in your attempts at magical visualization of the mental configuration of sometimes rather complex visualizations. These are mental and drawn with the mind. Another example well known in your culture is the visualization, in your mass, of the distortion of the love of the one infinite creator called Christianity, wherein a small portion of your foodstuffs is seen to be a mentally configured but entirely real man, the man known to you as Jehoshua, or, as you call this entity now, Jesus. It was by this method of sustained visualization over a period of training that we worked with these concepts. These concepts were occasionally drawn. However, the concept of one visualization per card was not thought of by us. Question 88.20.
Okay, so the concept that they used to create the tarot cards was the same concept that Jesus used for and by the visualization of and the creating of what's going on. So the archetypes set down in the Bible, in the letter to the churches, are written by Jesus, told that in the revelation of Jesus Christ. And that revelation is telling you about the chakras and how to balance the chakras. It is exactly what Ra is referring to here about the archetypes and those visualizations and those balancing of those that were used to make the tarot cards in the physical plane down here on Earth. Came from that visualizing concept by Joshua, by Jesus, that Jesus used when Jesus came down here. Okay? And so literally letting you know that Jesus was the one who created that prior to being on Earth, when Jesus was on Venus, prior to being on Earth. Ra doesn't say that to you there, but I'm telling you that knowledge because Ra couldn't tell you that knowledge 40 years ago. What Ra could tell you was what Ra did tell you, but what Ra was trying to tell you was that, whether you want to believe that or not, whether you believe that Jesus wasn't real or whether you believe that the religion that you learned before you learned about Jesus is the right way and that Jesus is fake, isn't going to change the knowledge of the universe. And that was what Ra was referring to there. Okay, so let's continue here.
Questioner: how did the teacher relay information to the student in respect to visualization? Answer: I am Ra. The process was Kabbalistic, that is, of the oral tradition of mouth to ear. Question 88.21. Questioner: then when Ra attempted to teach the Egyptians the concept of the tarot, was the same process used or a different one? Answer: I am Ra. The same process was used. However, those which were teach learners after us first drew these images to the best of their ability within the place of initiation and later began the use of what you call cards bearing these visualizations representations. Question 88.22. Questioner: were the court arcana and the minor arcana a portion of Ra's teachings, or was this something that came along later? Answer: I am Ra. Those cards of which you speak were the product of the influence of those of Chowdo and Summer. Question 88.23. Questioner: you mentioned earlier that the tarot was a method of divination. Would you explain that? Answer: I am Ra. We must first divorce the tarot as a method of divination from this major arcana as representative of 22 archetypes of the archetypical mind. The value of that which you call astrology is significant when used by those initiated entities which understand, if you will pardon the misnomer, the sometimes intricate considerations of the law of confusion. As each planetary influence enters the energy web of your sphere, those upon the sphere are moved much as the moon which moves about your sphere moves the waters upon your deeps. Your own nature is water in that you as mind, body, spirit complexes are easily impressed and moved. Indeed, this is the very Theban nature of your journey and vigil in this density, to not only be moved but to instruct yourself as to the preferred manner of your movement in mind, body, and spirit. Therefore, as each entity enters the planetary energy web, each entity experiences two major planetary influxes, that of the conception, which has to do with the physical, yellow ray manifestation of the incarnation, and that at the moment you call birth, when the breath is first drawn into the body complex of chemical yellow ray. Thus those who know the stars and their configurations and influences are able to see a rather broadly drawn map of the country through which an entity has traveled, is traveling, or may be expected to travel, be it upon the physical, the mental, or the spiritual level. Such an entity will have developed abilities of the initiate, which are normally known among your peoples as psychic or paranormal. When the archetypes are shuffled into the mix of astrologically oriented cards which form the so-called court arcana and minor arcana, these archetypes become magnetized to the psychic impressions of the one working with the cards, and thusly become instruments of a linkage between the practitioner of the astrological determinations and divinations and the one requesting information. Ofttimes such archetypical representations will appear in such a manner as to have seemingly interesting results, meaningful in configuration to the questioner. In and of themselves, the major arcana have no rightful place in divination, but rather are tools for the further knowledge of the self by the self for the purpose of entering a more profoundly, acutely realized present moment. Question 88.24. Questioner: Ra must have had, shall we say, a lesson plan or course of training for the 22 archetypes to be given either to those of third density of Ra or, later on, to those in Egypt. Could you describe this scenario for the training course? Answer: I am Ra. This shall be the last full query of this working. We find it more nearly appropriate to discuss our plans in acquainting initiates upon your own planet with this particular version of the archetypes of the archetypical mind. Our first stage was the presentation of the images, one after the other, in the following order: 1, 8, 15, 2, 9, 16, 3, 10, 17, 4, 11, 18, 5, 12, 19, 6, 13, 20, 7, 14, 21, 22. In this way the fundamental relationships between mind, body, and spirit could begin to be discovered.
Okay, I'm going to replay that again for those of you who may not have been able to keep up with those numbers. I want to leave that on the screen and let it float there for a minute, and then I'm going to replay it so that you hear that. Okay, so I'll replay the question so you understand the ramifications of that, right? Let me back this up. Okay, so the question, I'll read it and then let the computer read it. Ra must have had, shall we say, a lesson plan or course of training for the 22 archetypes. That's very important. 22 archetypes to be given either to those of third density of Ra or later on to those in Egypt. Could you describe the scenario for the training course? Okay, so let me back it up so you hear that question by the computer, and then we'll let Ra answer that, and we'll unpack that if you guys need me to. So because he's talking about the archetypes and in what order, so we'll let it play.
The 22 archetypes to be given either to those of third density of Ra or, later on, to those in Egypt. Could you describe this scenario for the training course? Answer: I am Ra. This shall be the last full query of this working. We find it more nearly appropriate to discuss our plans in acquainting initiates upon your own planet with this particular version of the archetypes of the archetypical mind. Our first stage was the presentation of the images, one after the other, in the following order: 1, 8, 15, 2, 9, 16, 3, 10, 17, 4, 11, 18, 5, 12, 19, 6, 13, 20, 7, 14, 21, 22. In this.
Okay, so if you have a tarot deck and your cards are numbered, right, and you have a 22 card deck, not a 54 card deck, or a big deck with the archetypes, which would still be numbered thusly. Okay, you would want to look at that particular order, first stage of the archetypical mind for the 22 archetypes of the learned or learning thereof, the version of the archetypes of the archetypical mind for the first stage was the presentation of the images one after the other in this following order. Okay. So I'll leave it there for those of you. You guys can go back and pause here and write that down. If you read tarot cards, or you know about tarot cards, or you have a deck of tarot cards and they're actually numbered specifically to make sure that it is an older deck so that the archetypes are the same, that they haven't changed them. They are the same even when they create new decks. They just transfer it to, like, if you have a goblin deck, or if you have an angel deck, or if you have a fairy deck, they're all still the same archetypes. You just have the visual representation of those archetypes in theme. Okay. But otherwise they are still the same archetypes. So like I said, I'll leave it to sit here for a second for those that wanted to do that. If not, you'll have to go back and pause there so that you can read that. Because if you are a person that knows anything about tarot, that's actually very interesting to look at exactly what Ra was saying here. And when you do that, which I have done, but I'm going to let you guys organically figure it out on your own, because of the activation that happens there and the knowledge that brings to you is something that you need to go through. And if I tell you about it ahead of time, you could say, well, I wouldn't have known that until you told me. So if it doesn't resonate with you, then you're not as learned as you think you are. No offense to anyone out there in the world who reads those in that order and finds out the archetypes and understands that and breaks that down for themselves and still doesn't get that. It's not your fault. You just aren't ready for that activation yet. But for those of you who are, and you are intuitive when you do readings with the divination cards, the tarot cards, you would be very, very interested to read those cards in that particular order. And that's just the first lesson. Let's continue.
This way the fundamental relationships between mind, body, and spirit could begin to be discovered. For as one sees, for instance, the matrix of the mind in comparison to the matrices of body and spirit, one may draw certain tentative conclusions. When, at length, the student had mastered these visualizations and had considered each of the 7 classifications of archetype, looking at the relationships between mind, body, and spirit, we then suggested consideration of archetypes in pairs 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5, 6 and 7. You may continue in this form for the body and spirit archetypes.
Thank you, Brooke, for writing that down. I love you, baby. Thank you for putting that there for me to put up visually. So if you're listening on the MP3 broadcast, you'll have to listen to the numbers. If you're watching it on video, you can pause there. Brooke wrote them down and put it in the chat, and I just put it up on the screen for those of you who would find it easier at that point to read that. Thank you, baby. Love you. All right, let's continue.
You will note that the consideration of the significator was left unpaired, for the significator shall be paired with archetype 22. At the end of this line of inquiry, the student was beginning to grasp more and more deeply the qualities and resonances of each archetype. At this point, using various other aids to spiritual evolution, we encourage the initiate to learn to become each archetype and, most importantly, to know as best as possible within your illusion when the adoption of the archetype's persona would be spiritually or metaphysically helpful. As you can see, much work was done creatively by each initiate. We have no dogma to offer. Each perceives that which is needful and helpful to the self. May we ask if there are any brief queries before we leave this working? Question 88.25. Questioner, is there anything that we can do to improve the contact or to make the instrument more comfortable? Answer, I am Ra. We, again, warned you concerning the distortions of the instrument's hands. The 4th density influence upon them could be inconvenient in that, if allowed to proceed without abatement, what you call your surgery shall be almost immediately necessary. The alignments are good. You have been fastidious. We leave you, my friends, in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing merrily in the power and in the glorious peace of the one infinite Creator. Adonai.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and start the next session, right? So that was session 88 of the Law of One. So the next session will load here when this ends. It'll automatically go to session 89. That's session 88, May 29th, 1982. We will go to session 89, June 9th, 1982.
I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. We communicate now. Question 89.1. Questioner, could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? Answer, I am Ra. It is as previously stated. Question 89.2. Questioner, I have two questions. The first of which is, during the last intensive meditation here the instrument experienced very strong conditioning from an entity which did not identify itself and which did not leave when she asked it to. Would you tell us what was occurring then? Answer, I am Ra. We find the instrument to have been given the opportunity to become a channel for a previously known friend. This entity was not able to answer the questioning of spirits in the name of Christ, as is this instrument's distortion of the means of differentiating betwixt those of positive and those of negative orientation. Therefore, after some resistance, the entity found the need to take its leave. Question 89.3. Questioner, was this particular entity the fifth density visitor that we have had quite often previously? Answer, I am Ra. This is correct.
So, see, if you take the right precautions in workspace by creating a bubble, creating a spell, a circle, casting a circle, by reflecting energy away from yourself, protecting yourself, right? Or by greeting them in the love and the light of the infinite creator, one can stave off negative information, negative entities, negative attacks. You'll see that there's people out there in the world that says you can't protect yourself just by saying I take away or I reflect your negative energy. You hear people saying that all the time because they're trying to get you convinced that you cannot defeat anything that's evil by yourself, because that person, whoever's telling you that, is trying to charge you money for something, and they're going to tell you things like, you have a negative entity attached to you, but for $250 I can make it go away. And that's what they do, instead of just literally telling you that you can reflect the energy away from yourself back to the person who's sending it against you, or reflect it to the universe, whatever you want to do. Every single person has that ability. I've trained many of people, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, to when psychics were starting to work with, I said for years, why is it that you have these ghost hunters and they're out there and none of them have any psychic abilities? Why do they not have a medium with them? And I said that forever and ever and ever and ever, and I wasn't the only one saying that. So finally, about 20 years ago, probably more like 15 years ago or 10, people started realizing, and psychics, mediums started going with these people. Next thing you know, they were part of the team, because having a medium to help when you're ghost hunting is far better for the outcome of ghost hunters than anything else. And now it's rare to find a ghost hunting team who does not have at least one medium with them. And I've trained many, many mediums when they were going and doing those things, including people that were, back in the day, they had priests that would do, the different things like exorcisms and things like that to get rid of people being possessed or clear a house. And they were trying to do things not as a psychic, but with abilities and with these words that they learned and spells that they learned even back to the Roman days. And I was saying again to the church, why are you not getting people involved that are mediums to help you do these things? They can literally sense them, talk to them, see them, interact with them. You guys don't know. You're scared little children holding onto a cross with a blanket over your head in the corner, chanting things to trying to defend yourself, and you have no idea what you're up against, where it is, however many of them there are. Why are you not taking people who can see them and embracing that? Because surely, I said this to the church, I've been knighted by the Holy Roman Catholic See. Surely if you believe that there are demons and entities that can possess a human body, then that means that you should also know that some people can see them, and you shouldn't have a problem with that. So how can you say there are disembodied spirits that could be haunting a place, but yet you're saying there can't be anyone who can actually see them from the physical? So I know that you guys know that that's a thing. You just don't want anybody else to learn that, because you don't want them ascending without your say-so. You don't want them ascending, period. So you want to control them in the mundane. If you're truly trying to help these people and you're truly in service to others, you will start hiring psychics to go with you to do these things. And forever, until until the 70s, 80s, going into the 90s now. They didn't do that. And eventually now they're even starting to do that, is my point. And every single person that I've ever trained, I didn't have to train them to be a psychic. I didn't have to train them to be a medium. The only thing I had to do was shift their thinking to the inner standing instead of standing under someone, instead of understanding, shift their thinking and empower them with the concept of you are the creator. You are part of the creator. You are a co-creator. Those people who are disembodied, who are evil, cannot create the way you can. You have the power. You have the manifestation. You have the ability to defend against and ward them off. You can stop them with your thoughts. You can stop them with your words. You need to realize that they cannot do anything to you because you are the polarization. You are the battery. You are the magnet that is the opposite, that pushes them away by your very beingness appearing there. You repulse them. So therefore, you're the one who can stand and move towards them, and they're the one that gets pushed away from you. They can't do that to you. That's why evil people can't even do that. Evil people have to physically do harm to your body to force you to do something, because they can't either. They can't stop you. They can only physically torture you and beat you. This is why I teach people that if you want to defeat evil, you do not engage them in physical combat, because that's what they want you to do. They want you to get physical so that they can justify murdering you, raping you, pillaging you, destroying you, enslaving you. You don't fight them that way. When I was in think tanks and we were talking about that back in 2012, I was saying no violence, no overthrow of governments, change the culture, and the government changes. Change the culture. Be the change you want to see. Mahatma Gandhi said that. Be the change you want to see in the world. Change the culture of the person. Empower the person with knowledge, and that is going to change the culture, and that is going to change governments. That is going to change the face of the world. Trying to figure out how you're going to nuke a government is not going to do it. It's going to get you arrested, jailed, imprisoned, and enslaved, if not just murdered. You can fight a person in the physical and defeat them. You can't defeat an idea. Once it's unleashed, you have to murder everyone who knows the idea to defeat the idea. And we know that that doesn't work. Even when they tried to do that after Mary, when she left after Jesus's demise, when she was exiled and left and went to the south of France, once the church found out that she was over there, they sent their knights there and murdered 2 million people in the south of France to try and eradicate that memory and that religion that was teaching the way Jesus was teaching. We know this because it didn't work. We know this because the knowledge is still around of those events, and they were handed down from people to people, and people wrote books about them, and Dan Brown read them, and Dan Brown eventually wrote the Da Vinci Code and eventually became a movie about the concept of what was going on for the last 2,000 years by the Roman Catholic Church and all Christian churches, being controlled from the top, not aware. 99% of the patrons, 99% of the clergy, never knowing what changes were made to the church during the councils of Nicaea, at least those two, but there were like 50 other councils. But the Council 1 and Council 2 of Nicaea, those were the biggest changes that were made to all religions around the earth, but specifically the Christian religion around the earth. You can look into that. You can look that up. I'm not making any of it up. Okay, so let's go back here and continue with Ra and talking about this information and continuing on these archetypes.
Question 89.
We're continuing on the assassin, that comes from that knowledge of defending yourself and how to stop the assassin. And so he asked, was the particular entity the fifth density visitor that we had quite often previously? And Ross said, this is correct. So then Dawn's asking the question, is he back with us at this time?
9.4. Questioner, is he back with us at this time? Answer, I am Ra. No. The attempt to speak was due to the vigilant eye of the minions of this entity, which noted what one may call a surge of natural telepathic ability upon the part of the instrument. This ability is cyclical, of the 18-diurnal period cycle, as we have mentioned aforetime. Thusly, this entity determined to attempt another means of access to the instrument by free will. Question 89.5. Questioner, was this what I would refer to as an increased ability to receive telepathically over a broader range of basic frequencies so as to include not only the Confederation but also this entity? Answer, I am Ra. This is incorrect. The high point of the cycle sharpens the ability to pick up the signal but does not change the basic nature of the carrier wave. Shall we say, there is greater power in the receiving antennae? Question 89.6. Questioner, this question may be meaningless, but would a fifth density entity of the Confederation who was positively polarized transmit on the same frequency as our negatively polarized fifth density companion? Answer, I am Ra. This is correct and is the reason that the questioning of all contacts is welcomed by the Confederation of Planets in the service of the Infinite Creator.
Right. So that's a hard pill to swallow right there at that point when you find that out, right? So a diurnal cycle is a cycle of day. It's a diurnal, meaning a day. Cassie, she said, what is a diurnal cycle? That's a 24-hour period on this planet. The reason that Ra says diurnal cycle is because there's depending on the size of the planet and the distance away from the star, you're going to, and the speed of a rotation of the said planet, the one day is going to be specific to the very planet. So he was using the vernacular of a generic diurnal, meaning day cycle or rotation of your planet. So that's what he's talking about there. He's talking about one on this planet, 24 hours. That's what he's talking about there. So, this is why the problem with getting back to what Ra was saying there when Don asked the question, could this information be, this question may be meaningless, but would the fifth density entity, no, that was the one before that. So could it be that this information would be transmitted on the same frequency by someone that's in service to self as in service to others? And the answer is yes. And that's why we say that the questioning would be something that you would want to do. And we welcome that questioning, because you have to be careful when you're talking to an entity. Anybody who's ever used a Ouija board and heard stories about Ouija boards would be somebody that would know the information that sometimes people get from a Ouija board, and trusting the person or entity that is giving you this information, that you don't know for certain that that person is good or not good or bad, unless you started talking to them. And a perfect example of that was last week here on the Law of One, when Craig Leo Ra was on. And if any of you are friends with him and you know him, you may think that he is a great person, and he propagates and like he is in service to others. But after me listening to him and talking to him and having conversation with him last week, I came to the conclusion eventually that he was actually in service to self, and he's pretending to be in service with others. So you can fool humans if you are in service to self, but you can't fool the universe. So anybody who's awake enough will be able to tell the difference. And when people said, no, Leo, I think you just misunderstood, I'm like, go back and actually pay attention to what he said and what I said to him, and look at the words that he used. And I pointed those out. Someone who's in service to others would not have said many of the things that he said in the way he said them. Only self-serving people speak the way he was speaking in the chat in the Law of One last week. And I said, I would love to have more conversations with you. Please send me in Messenger. Please send me a friend's request on Facebook, or talk to me in Messenger. If you want to get into the Law of One class chat, we have a chat you can get into, talk to somebody that's in here in the group, and we'll get you in there. And he said yes, and never did any of that. When the Law of One was over, he went away. He's never contacted me. It's been a whole week. He hasn't contacted me since. He hasn't contacted anybody, so far as I know. I don't know if some of you are friends with him or not. But even if you are, don't believe me, listen to him, follow him, and you'll eventually learn. But he was an example of someone who is a high-level, intelligent person, who is high-level in service to others, or in service to self, and he's learned a lot and gotten a lot of downloads, and he's paying attention to and reading everything that everybody's posting on the internet. He's doing his research, and he's using the knowledge that he has, and he's doing it, and he's acting as if he is in service to others, and he's gaining popularity, and he's doing it because he's in service to self. And I went onto a site. Brooke actually went on there first and looked at a video that he had where he was speaking. And she said, I don't even think that's even him on the video. I think it's his image, but that I think it's AI. And tell me that's not AI. And so I went and looked at his video that he had on his page, and I have authenticated videos and images for almost 30 years. And I looked at that, and the first thing I did was looked at his mouth and watched his mouth move. And then I looked at his eyes, and I went, wow, that's AI. It's cloned his voice, and he's using an image of himself, but that's not him. That's AI. So he may say it's not, but it is. It's AI. So even the video that he made of himself talking is fake, and he has it posted on his page. So that's a person who is high level, in service to self, very intelligent, and it's rare that you find somebody like that who will end up talking. But he wasn't. He must not have been awake enough to know that I would see through him. He was arrogant enough to think that I wouldn't notice that. And the last thing was when I was actually playing Ra. Now this guy thinks he's Ra. That's why he has the name Ra there. He actually says, "I am Ra." So he was quoting Ra, and then Ra was talking about what he was talking about. And when I paused it to talk about what Ra just said, which was contradicting what he claimed a few minutes earlier, he knew it. Because when I stopped and said, now here Ra is talking about that very thing, his comment was, here we go. Someone who's in service to others would never make that comment. Only a person in service to self will ever say in a conversation, oh, here we go. Only self-serving people ever say that. Only ego says those words. And I said, that's when I went, here we go. Why would you say that? And that's when I said, okay, look, I've given you every opportunity so far in this show to show me that you were in service to others, and you are not. You're in service to self, and you're pretending, and you're hiding. And at that point, when I accused him the second time, he did not respond. He did not say, no, I'm not. I'm in service to others. He did not say that. And had he not understood the concept, that would be a big problem, because he claims to be Ra. So why would he not understand the concept of something that Ra actually stated using Ra's vernacular, and he didn't respond to it? So anyways, yeah. So yeah, Brooke's talking about that. Yeah, he's using AI to grabs people's attention, then misleading them. All of my feelings and beliefs that he is self-serving. She said, yucky energy. Yeah, she went there first and looked at his page and said, dude, you need to go and look at this video. Tell me I'm wrong, but that's AI. And I went and looked at it and was like, no, you're right. That's AI. So I don't know him personally. And some of you out there listening to me might be fans of his, and you might get mad at me. I don't care. You do what you need to do. If you don't believe me, you go ahead and follow him. Eventually, you're going to be hearing people talking about him, or you're going to learn about him yourself. And he's going to serve the all, because that's what everyone does, including self-serving people. They serve the greater good of all by what they do. However, he is a rare thing that you will find somebody of that high level still here on earth, self-serving, that's not trying to be the devil or trying to be the greatest evil, taking over the world as a dictator. He's actually moving into the spiritual realm and trying to grab spiritual people and hold on to them for his own gain, which does happen, but most people don't do it the way he's doing it. So, but I tried to give him every opportunity to prove that he was in service to others when I first sensed that he was in service to self, and he just didn't do it. And then he disappeared. So we'll see. And I'm sure he's probably spending his time talking crap about me, which is okay if he does, because then again, let people decide what they're going to decide on their own, because you guys will figure it out. You'll either think I'm evil and run away from me because people say I'm evil and I'm the devil and I'm trying to run you down a wrong path, especially the zealots that are religious, not spiritual. They do that a lot. Even though I have 4 titles and 4 religions, they still say that about me, because what am I doing? I'm talking free thinking. I'm telling you to actually question everything and to ascend, because that's what all of the ascended masters were teaching in every religion originally, and that all of them, if they were here today, would discount their own religion and say this is wrong and it is not what I taught and it's not what I was trying to teach. Okay. So no, they're some of them are, Brooke said, they're getting better at hiding. You need to see through the soul. Yeah, some of them that are higher level are better at hiding. The good thing is that the natural selection of things is that when you are in service to others and you start your ascension, it becomes harder for anyone to fool you and trick you because you start being able to see through that. And that's why when people say all of a sudden they wake up a little bit and they go, man, everybody on the news is just lying. All the politicians are just lying. They used to hide it. They're not even hiding it anymore. And I'm like, no, they were never hiding it, bro. You just are aware of it now. You've changed. They haven't. This is exactly the way they've always talked. My entire life and every life I've been in, this is exactly the way those people speak. It hasn't changed. And in this modern era, that's exactly the way they speak, exactly the way they act, and exactly what they do in the same modus operandi. You're just aware of it now because you're changed and you're waking up. So you're seeing through the easy lies. The ones that are very high, like Brooke was saying, the ones that are very high level, they get really good at hiding. And that's what she's referring to, where they're getting better at hiding. The ones that are higher level are getting better at hiding because they're now having to fight against people that are higher level. So some of them are evolving and becoming better at it than the status quo because they're realizing that the status quo isn't working anymore. So they're upping their game. She's absolutely right. And that was a perfect example of that when he was here last week. Okay, let's continue here with the law of one.
Question 89.7. Questioner. Question 2. Name has also felt some conditioning which was unbidden while channeling Latwii recently and in his personal meditations. Could you also tell us what occurred in these cases? Answer. I am Ra. The entity which has been companion has a vibratory frequency but a small amount lesser than that of the social memory complex known as Latwii. Also, Latwii is the primary comforter of the Confederation for entities seeking at the vibratory complex level of the one known as Name. Therefore, this same companion has been attempting the contact of this instrument also, although this instrument would have great difficulty in distinguishing the actual contact due to the lack of experience of your companion at this type of service. Nevertheless, it is well that this instrument also choose some manner of the challenging of contacts. Question 89.8. Questioner. How many of our years ago was Ra's third density ended? Answer. I am Ra. The calculations necessary for establishing this point are difficult since so much of what you call time is taken up before and after third density as you see the progress of time from your vantage point. We may say in general that the time of our enjoyment of the choice making was approximately 2.6 million of your sun years in your past. However, we correct this instrument. Your term is billion, 2.6 billion of your years in your past.
That's funny. As I was reading that, I didn't realize that he corrected that. And when he was talking about the 2.6 million years, I was like, no, that's like 26 billion years. And then all of a sudden I kept reading and I was like, oh, he corrects it right here. That's funny. So, yeah, so from our point of view, Ra, the collective of that is Ra, was last and third density 2.6 billion years ago. 2.6 billion years ago. Okay. They were in third density. Okay. So that was the Raw collective, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them that were in that collective were only 2.6 billion years old. That's just the last time the Raw collective as a collective was in third dimension going through that. Okay. So there are some of the souls in the Raw collective that are far older than that went through and actually came down and helped the Raw collective as well and stayed with them as they were moving up to assist them, and then came down here to Earth that are even older than that. Okay. Right. And Shelley said the government corrects dollars with millions to billions. So yeah, so you have to realize that perspective, though, right? So from our point of view down here, the numbers are vast because things are not now. So there's a differentiation because there's a past, a present, and a future down here. When you're in third dimension, when you get outside of third dimension, it's a lot longer or a lot less because it's now, right? So you're outside of time. So everything is just now. There is no time. So you're outside of time. So it's a quantum weirdness that people don't understand the concept of down here until you do. So it's really bizarre, and it's hard for us to describe it to you. That everything's now, and the distance of time is only the distance it takes the physical body to move from one place to another. And when you start moving up in the spiritual sense into 4D, 5D, 6D, you start losing the physical body and you start residing more in the non-physical body and the spiritual body, which is energy and it's light. So you then can stay in one place and through the mind instantaneously travel from one place to another because you don't have a physical body to move in a physical way to a physical plane. You are energy and you can move outside of time, so you don't have to be bound by the physics of moving at the speed of light. Because of being energy, you just go from one part of the universe to another part of the universe instantaneously. And you saw Frank Herbert play that out in the Dune saga, in the Dune books, with the folding of space that was done by the consortium that controlled space travel, where they literally would fold space and move. Now, Frank Herbert wrote that a long time ago, and scientists are actually talking about that creating a wormhole. The Einstein-Rosen bridge was a wormhole concept of traveling for the distance in between two places that are a lot further by folding space and traveling through a wormhole to that place instead of having to travel in a straight line to that place. And because the universe is cyclical in nature and it is a torus in nature, not a flat plane, just like the earth is not flat, it's actually a torus. It's not flat because nothing in the universe is actually flat like that. Except for when you come down to a planet, you can look at a flat plane, but the planet itself is a sphere. And I know there's a lot of people out there that believe that the earth is flat, and they also probably don't believe the sky is blue. And they probably don't believe in reincarnation. So there's a lot of that going on, right? So that's okay. They can believe that. Anybody can believe whatever it is that they want. It doesn't change the way the universe is. It just means you don't believe it. And that's okay. You're not supposed to believe it until you do believe it. That's just the way it works in the universe. So I don't usually try to convince people, but I will argue the argument to see how much they know their argument and how well they know their argument, just to see how far that they can go. And I can argue both sides of the argument, but I don't. Not always, but I can. I can be the devil's advocate. Anyway, let's continue here for a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to have to go. Okay, let's go here.
However, this time, as you call it, is not meaningful, for our intervening space-time has been experienced in a manner quite that your third density experience of space-time. Question 80.
See, and so he was explaining that. So it's hard for you to understand the concept down here because up there is no time, and that's what I was trying to explain there in what I was saying. So the 2.6 billion years is from our perspective, not from the perspective of outside of time, because it's just now. So you don't understand that concept until you don't have time to relate. Down here, we have to look at a clock, and we have days, and we have cycles. That's the diurnal cycle that we were talking about earlier. And so because of that, we're ruled by nature. We're ruled by the time of the day, daylight, day, night, night. Each year is a cycle of spring through, back around winter, fall, winter, spring again, summer, fall, winter, spring every year. And it renews itself wherever you're living. It gets renewed in that time period. Unless you live in the Southern Hemisphere and you're a European-run country, and then your year is the same year as the people in the North, although the physical year that you're living in, like if you're in Australia, winter is in the summertime and summertime is in the wintertime. So Christmas for you is in the middle of summer, even though it's December on your calendar, because you're going by the European calendar, which is a Northern Hemisphere calendar, because that's who your rulers are, who created that calendar. And your government is being run by them. Like if you're Australian, your government is a commonwealth of the United Kingdom, of the King of England, like America used to be. And some people try to claim they still are. Canada is as well. even though they have their own government, they're still a commonwealth. They're still actually owned by the British Crown. And if you're Australian and don't believe that, you should look it up because it's true, right? So some people say that about America because America used to be a commonwealth, a colony of England. But even the English don't claim it these days. And some people are like, no, they're just doing that to hide. I'm like, yeah, those same people probably believe the Earth's flat too. And they're just hiding that from the whole world and everybody's in on it. Okay, here we go.
9.9. Questioner. It appears that the end of Ra's third density coincided with the beginning of this planet's second density. Is that correct? Answer. I am Ra. This is roughly correct. Question 89.10. Questioner. Did the planet Venus become a fourth density planet at that time? Answer. I am Ra. This is so.
Okay, so I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to end up rewinding this, not today, but I'm going to give you this tidbit, and then I am going to have to go, and then we will start this again. I'll go back and go back to this next week because I want to get into this even more. But what's his name? I can't think of his name right now. The actor who, what is his name? Those of you, I think, Cassie, you know who I'm talking about. The guy that all of a sudden came out with all of his theories of stuff in the science issue, and I've talked about him a few times. Was his name Terrence Howard? Terrence Howard, oddly enough, I don't know if he's read the Law of One. Terrence Howard, in his description of the things and how things work in the physics, which I would love to have a conversation with Terrence Howard. Please, Terrence Howard, or anyone who knows Terrence Howard, if you are in any way connected to Terrence Howard out there in the world, tell him about this section in the Law of One, and tell him that Leonard O'Neill wants to have a conversation with him about it, because in session 89, question 8, 9, and going into 10, Ra is talking about that very concept, because Dawn back in 1984 asked the question of when the Earth, well, at that time, 2.6 billion years ago, was that at the time when the Earth had its second density, second dimensional vibration start. And was this at the time when that was happening on the Earth? Was Venus at that point still having the third dimensional activity going on in Venus? And Ra said, yes. Terrence Howard has said that the planets in our solar system have been created and have been moving away from the sun at a certain rate of speed, that we're all moving away. The Earth is moving away from the sun. All planets are moving away from the sun, the same way that our solar system or the Milky Way galaxy is moving away from the center of the universe. We're moving away from the center of our universe, Sol, the sun, at a slow rate of speed. And he said that other planets, when they were Mars, for instance, he says, Terrence Howard, when Mars was in the position that Earth is in now, at this distance away from the sun, there was third dimensional life forms on Mars, and it moved away from the sun, and the Earth was in a closer orbit and was slowly moving away from the sun as well. And that orbit took it to where it is currently. And now we have sustainable third dimensional life forms on here. And eventually we are going to move away from the sun far enough to where third dimensional life forms are not going to be congruent with or conducive to living on Earth, but fourth dimensional life forms will be. And then that will transition just like Mars transitioned. And there is no fourth dimensional life forms on Mars either. And it's too far out. And Venus, which was further out, would have been closer in at the time. Say Ra happened to be here on this solar system, it would have been about 2.6 billion years ago. Venus would have been in the exact position away from the sun that the Earth is currently in. And that is what Dawn just asked, and that is what Ra just confirmed. So I don't know if Terrence Howard listened to or read the Law of One, but he described that exact concept in the planetary bodies that we have here, in his theories that he just came up with last year. And he was literally saying Mars, when it was here, everything transitions. And as the planets are moving away, first dimensional, second dimensional, third dimensional life forms will be on the planets at a certain distance away from the star that we call the Sol, the sun. And as they move away, that's going to transition from third to 4D, 4D to 5D, 5D to 6D, 6D to 7D. As it moves further and further away, the life forms will evolve on the planet because they will be less physical and more spiritual. And Terrence Howard said that. So I don't know if he read The Law of One. I don't know what his influence is, but I would love to have that conversation with him, because if he's unaware of it, I would love to get his take on it if he reads The Law of One and gets his take on it, because he didn't quote it from The Law of One, but he talked about it. And I noticed that when he talked about it and wanted to talk to him, and I haven't been able to, because I'm sure that everyone on the planet is trying to talk to Terrence Howard. So little old Leonard O'Neill would not be high on his list of people that he would be wanting to talk to. However, I would love to find out, because he remembers also being in the womb. I don't know if he remembers life before being on Earth and being in Terrence's body, but I do know, because he said in his conversation on Joe Rogan, that he remembers being inside the womb and remembers developing as a fetus and being in there and seeing his own body floating in the embryonic fluid, and actually talked about his right hand and seeing his right hand and called it was the right hand his friend. So he at least was awake enough to remember that, but maybe not quite unveiled enough to know that he was an immortal soul and to be completely self-aware. He was self-aware, but not awake. But then again, he may have been kind of playing that down a little bit because he was talking on Joe Rogan for the rest of the world. And so for credibility purposes, he may have been just saying that part of it. I don't know. I would love to talk to him to find out exactly how much he knows and how much he remembers, because at the very least, he was awake enough to remember being in the womb and being a fetus in the womb, not just prior to birth. So I would love to find that out. And he's on to the physics of how the transition happens with planets in the solar system that Ra talked about in 1984, or whatever date this is, in 1982, 84, when Ra was talking about that concept right here. So I'm going to leave it here. Next Friday, I'll back up and we'll start that over again, and we'll go from there and talk about that one more time. But anybody out there in the world that hears my voice, if you know anybody that knows Terrence, tell him that I would love to talk to him about that. And if not, get the message to him to find out if he's read The Law of One, specifically session 88 of The Law of One, because it talks about his concept of the evolution of planets and the vibration of first dimension, second dimension, third dimension, fourth dimensional beings being able to live on a planet, and where they would be in reference to the Earth or reference to the sun, distance-wise away from the sun, and life being on them at that time. So that's actually pretty intense. I would love to know if he's actually done that or not. Okay. Brooks said, another amazing and informative Raw session, right? Yeah, thank you. Great job. Yeah, great job, babe. I love you, baby. Thank you for all the time and prep that you do. I'm going to put that up on the screen so people can see that. Thank you. Thank you for appreciating me. Right. So, yeah, I love you, and I'll talk to you in a little bit. Okay. So, yeah, you guys, if you have any way of getting a hold of Terrence, I would love to find out the answer to that, to find out if he, in fact, read The Law of One. I don't care, because it's not like I'm trying to expose him. I want to know how much he knows and what he doesn't know, because I do take him serious, and did from when he spoke on Joe Rogan's podcast. I was like, this man's going to change the face of the world in physics, and they're not going to believe him at first, and they're going to be trying to just count him, because that's what they do. That's what you do. I was a scientist. I was going to be a physicist, and I was going to, government wanted me to work for them, the U.S. government, and tried to recruit me from age 11. And I said no. And once I realized they were already stealing my information, I was then burned it all and stopped writing it down for them to be able to figure it out. So as soon as he came out and started talking about what he did about the flower of life and everything else, I immediately didn't question. I didn't look at that and go, they're going to hate him. I saw that, but I didn't hate him. I saw that they were going to hate him, and went, yeah, he's going to get a lot of opposition, because in science, that's what you do. You try to disprove somebody as long as you can before you can prove it. And it's just the people that see that and then try to go forward with that end up forwarding theories. But the problem is, it's still, science will still try to disprove you forever, because that's how the only way you can prove something is to weed out everything that it could be. So you have to try and disprove it over and over and over and over. And when you can't disprove it eventually, then people will go forward with it. Okay, so I love you guys, and I will talk to you guys either in the chat or I'll talk to you guys on Wednesday, or I'll see you guys back on the Law of One next Friday. Okay, I love you guys. Have a great weekend. Have a great night. This has been Orion Rising. I am your host, Leonard O'Neill. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good morrow, depending on where in the world you are tuning into this show.